across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's an awful lot to talk about, including allegations from the Prime Minister that Nigel Farage's economic plan is Liz Truss all over again. We're going to talk to the chairman of Reform UK a little bit later on. We're also going to speak to an economist who advised Liz Truss on the truth of that allegation and take a little look at what Keir Starmer has been saying. We're also expecting a press conference from the Liverpool, the Merseyside Police a little bit later on in the programme around 5 o'clock. So we'll bring you the latest on what has been happening in Liverpool with that. And the Talk exclusive, fly tipping becomes the new county lines as crooks are cashing in on a waste racket. We'll take a look again at Robert Jenrick's video. He did a very good interview with Ian Collins a little bit earlier on about going up to people who are dodging fares at trains. It's something that annoys me, it annoys so many different people. We pay our way, we pay our taxes, we play by the rules, and so many other people don't, and they get away with it. Why is that? Well, we'll look into that and get your thoughts on that as well. Also, the striking junior doctors, they say they want another pay rise, this time 29%. They've already got a 22% pay rise. Do you think they should get it? What do you think of their strike action? Let me know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call and get your voice on the air, get your point across. You can also text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, or you can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. Tech Up Dave will listen to it and we'll play out as many of them as we can between now and 7. You can use the same number to send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss as always here on Talk Drive. Stay with me. Well, the Prime Minister has been in the Northwest today. He's been giving a big speech, and Nigel Farage is the man in his sights. Yesterday, the Reform UK leader talked about the fact that he believes that there's a lot of money that can be saved from things like DEI. It can be saved from all sorts of other ways, saving money in local councils and saving money at a national level by cutting back things like net zero, by making sure that local councils don't have waste, by making sure that there aren't all these quangos, and what do they actually do, and should they be cut even by 5% would save, Nigel Farage says, enough money. Now there's a warning from the Prime Minister. Earlier, he attacked Nigel Farage.
That's the question you have to ask about Nigel Farage. Can you trust him? Can you trust him with your future? Can you trust him with your jobs? Can you trust him with your mortgages, your pensions, your bills? And he gave the answer on Tuesday. A resounding no. He set out economic plans that contained billions upon billions of completely unfunded spending. Precisely the sort of irresponsible splurge that sent your mortgage cost, your bills, and the cost of living through the roof. It's Liz Truss all over again. Now, in opposition, we said that she would crash the economy and leave you to pick up the bill. And we were right. And we were elected to fix that mess. Now in government, we're once again fighting the same fantasy.
Keir Starmer speaking in St Helens in the northwest of England. Lots to discuss in terms of what he said. Liz Truss all over again. He said it was precisely the sort of irresponsible splurge that sent your mortgage costs soar, your bills and the cost of living through the roof. It's Liz Truss all over again. The views of the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, on Nigel Farage. I think he's quite rattled, actually. I think making that speech about Reform UK shows how scared he is. And Reform UK, of course, doing very, very well in the polls. Let's speak to Julian Jessup. He's an economics fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Julian, I think I'm right in saying that you advised Liz Truss on her economic plans back in the day.
I did, and before she became Prime Minister. I'm not saying she necessarily took my advice, but I was certainly involved in some of the early discussions.
Do you think this is a fair comparison in regard to what Keir Starmer is saying? There's a couple of points to this, I suppose. There's the, is he fair to criticise Liz Truss for what she did, as some of our viewers and listeners think he perhaps wouldn't be. I 100% think he is. And secondly, is what Nigel Farage is proposing the same thing? And thirdly, is it actually fair to compare the two?
Yeah, well, I think this whole approach is going to backfire. The sound bites about Farage being Trust 2.0, I think, are pretty lame and stale and won't impress many people. But if you look into the detail, what the Prime Minister says isn't right anyway. So he talks about Liz Truss crashing the economy. That's not true, simply because the economy didn't crash. There's undoubtedly turmoil in the
Sorry,
in the
you think the
financial.
economy didn't crash? Why
No,
do you
well,
say
the
that?
economy, the economy didn't crash. If you look at what we normally describe as the economy, economic activity, then there was no impact in the data at all.
Lots of
There was
people lost an awful
undoubtedly
lot of money
turmoil in
from
the
their
financial
pensions.
market.
Mortgages went up. I
Okay,
mean,
let's
for
separate
many
those things
people, they
out.
feel it may not technically be the case that the economy crashed, but a lot of people had very, very bad economic results as a result of what Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss did, Julian.
Well, actually, no. You're obviously right that if anybody had tried to remortgage in the few weeks in the
Well,
immediate
many people
wake of
did.
the Well, not that many people. And the point is that mortgage rates were rising anyway. There had been for a number of months, both in the UK and elsewhere. So attributing all of the rise in mortgage rates since the mini budget to Liz Truss, frankly, is ridiculous. That doesn't stand up. Now, obviously, Liz Truss did things badly, but the mistakes that she made are not mistakes that it looks like for reform might make. So, for example, she cut taxes before cutting spending. Whereas reform, at least on paper, has said they'll cut spending first. And she also surprised the markets with some of the additional measures that she did, particularly the cut in the higher rate of income tax. Whereas reform still has, a number of years to, detail exactly how they're going to pay for their tax and spending plans. And if they do form the government, it will be much less of a surprise when they implement those plans. That said, I think the Prime Minister is right on one point. There are lots of doubts at the moment about the affordability of both reforms, tax and spending plans. So there are big question marks here, but I don't think that the Prime Minister's intervention today will actually help move things along.
Where do you stand on the fact that the pledge to increase the threshold for paying the basic rate of income tax should go up to £20,000? That is what Nigel Farage says would be a good thing. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that could cost between 50 and 80 billion a year. That's money we don't have.
Well, on paper, it looks like a really good idea. I mean, it's a sort of simplification of the tax system that lifts a lot of low-paid people out of paying tax altogether. So that's good for the demand side of the economy because they'll undoubtedly spend that money. I mean, it might also have some supply side benefits. So it might increase the incentive to work if you can take home more of your pay. The problem, though, as the IFS and others have identified, is it could be potentially very expensive. I think 50 to 70 billion is a plausible estimate for the upfront cost. What reform would presumably say is that you'll partly pay for that by savings on welfare benefits and higher economic growth and some of the other things that they promised to save money on as well, like net zero. Whether those sums really add up or not, I think at the moment that's a really valid question. And the markets, I think, will need a lot of convincing.
Tell me what you think of the threat from reform, the fact that they are outlining now not just plans on immigration, not just plans in regard to local government, but the threat to the government in terms of the fact that they are doing very well in the polls. They're always going to have to, at some stage, put more meat on the bone in regard to these proposals. Is this the right way to do it?
Well, I think what they're doing at the moment is just putting down markers for what they would like to do. These are sort of broad brush principles. And at the moment, of course, no party has set out a detailed, costed manifesto for what they might do if they win the next election. So I've got, I say, some sympathy for reform being a little bit vague at the moment. But even if you take everything that they say at face value, are sort of contradictions. So on the one hand, they're planning to, or promising to reduce the size of the state. On the other hand, there are lots of areas where they're planning to spend more or to renationalise industries, take them back into public control. So there's some quite mixed signals there.
That's an interesting one, actually. Sorry to interrupt you, Julian, but would you say economically Nigel Farage is left wing or right wing? Because there are mixed signals coming out here, and I just don't know the answer.
Yeah. I would say he's populist, and he will say whatever is popular, whether that's a left-wing idea like nationalising things or a more right-wing idea like cutting taxes. So I think he's basically somebody trying to be elected. Now, nothing wrong with that. I mean, he's clearly very popular. He's very successful at doing this. But as the election approaches, you will get many more questions about exactly what it is that he's going to do. Is it consistent and is it affordable?
Yes, and that's the key question. Julian, thank you. That's Julian Jessup there, who is an economics fellow at the Institute of Economic Affairs, who advised Liz Truss on her economic plans. Mick in Wallington says Starmer is afraid to meet the public. He goes to Liverpool to meet the police, but not victims or supporters. Today he goes to a glass factory under controlled conditions. Farage is out with the people, says Mick in Wallington. Starmer's speech about Farage, I would throw the question back at him, can we trust you? The answer to date is a resounding no. Kathy says the audacity of Keir Starmer asking if we can trust Nigel Farage. After the lies and broken promises he's made, it makes my blood boil. Absolutely appalling disgrace of a Prime Minister, says Kathy in Gloucester. Lorraine says when the Chinese government openly welcomes Starmer's Chagos deal, we'll talk about that later on in the programme by the way, as a massive achievement, despite his claim that Beijing has opposed it. You just know how untrustworthy Starmer is, and that his constant lies are now bordering on treachery. And Jane says the Prime Minister is pathetic. There will be nothing left in 2029 after the damage he and his government have done and are doing to the country. Well, let's talk to Ben in Essex. Ben, I understand you're a bond trader, so you know all about the price of debt, certainly. What do you make of what Farage is saying and what Starmer is saying?
Okay, so thank you for having me on your show. It's not the first time I've been on talkTV, but the first time on your show.
Well, great to have you on, Ben. Tell us what you think.
So just to correct you, I was a bond trader from 1992 until 2002, and then I was a crude oil trader after that. So I have so I'm not currently a bond trader. I just want to pick up on the fact that Keir Starmer is banging on today about how, and it has been in the past, and so has Reeves as well, about how the failed economics and the budget on the mini budget of Liz Truss was detrimental and terrible for this country, and in the short term it was, and to a certain extent I do agree with your last caller. I forget his name, but
Julian Jessup, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our guest there, yeah.
The thing is, under the Liz Truss budget, 10-year gilt yields, which is basically the benchmark in which
it's the price of debt, isn't it? It's how much debt costs, isn't it?
How much debt costs and how much interest we pay on our current debt, right? That got up to, I believe, from memory, it got up to about 4.5%, roughly, there or thereabouts, give or take a couple of basis points, which is basically each point is a basis point, right? So, but under this current government 10-year gilt yields have got up to 4.75 to 4.8% as of, I think, about last week, okay? So we are borrowing more now because of our economic criteria and the way that we conduct business within the global economic bond markets, which basically derives how much interest we pay on our debt, 25%. Or 0.25%, 25 basis.
I don't want to get too technical, Ben. You'll understand it, what I won't. What we do know. Hold on a second, Ben.
Basically, it's more. It's more.
Yeah, and what we do know. You're absolutely right, Ben. And what we do know is that servicing that debt, even paying the interest payments of that, is more than the budget of two major government departments. I think it's housing and education put together. So it's incredibly expensive, isn't it, Ben?
Absolutely, and I just want to pick up on one other point, which is not the point I phoned in about. You was mentioning to this the last guest that you had about the rising of income tax to £20,000.
Yeah, the threshold. Yeah.
The threshold. Yeah. Now I know that's going to basically equate to, due to predictions, but potentially about 70 billion. Correct? Is that correct?
Between 50 and 80 billion, the Institute for Fiscal Studies says. Yeah.
Okay, right. But what that will do is that if more money in people's pockets means more spending, and that's going to affect really more the lower classes to the middle classes than it will the upper classes. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, this is going to sound terrible, but the problem is that forgive me for saying this, right? But the things that the lower classes tend, and I come from a working class council estate. Okay, so I know this for a fact. The products and things that people spend most of in the working class environment are highly taxable things like alcohol and cigarettes. I know that you're going to say...
You can't demonise everyone who's working class as someone who drinks and smokes their way all the time.
I come from a working class environment.
Doesn't mean you're being particularly nice to them, but listen, there are highly taxable things in the economy, Ben.
I'm not trying to be. What I'm trying to say is that people that don't have a lot of money spend it more than people that do. So when you raise the tax threshold to £20,000 and you've got more money in people's pockets, they're going to be putting more money in the coffers of the
and maybe that'll lead to growth. Ben, thanks for your thoughts there. I appreciate that. Malcolm's in Devon and has some thoughts on Nigel Farage as well. Malcolm, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Right, how's things?
Hi, Malcolm. Very well, yes. What would you like to say? Malcolm, are you there?
I was listening to that speech that... Yeah, can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Hello? Can you hear me, Peter?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
I was listening to that speech that you played for Keir Starmer, and I don't really know what to say. I just couldn't understand the fact that he just doesn't get what the people of the country think of him and what he says and does. I just don't get it. How he can turn around and understand that. Myself, I've lost £200 a month because I've got my own business now because of the budget. I now have to take £200 less for myself out of my company. I'm losing, about £300 a year on the Red Ed and the stupid net zero. So that's 500 quid, let alone all the taxes I'm now paying and everything else that I can't accept or get. How can he understand that he thinks that we don't trust Nigel Farage when...
Yeah. Do you trust Nigel Farage?
How can we trust him?
Do you trust Nigel Farage?
I trust anybody apart from the Red. Yeah.
Okay.
I believe in the policies that he believes. I want our country back, and I want to get some money back for myself. I didn't vote for net zero. I didn't vote for when Boris brought it in. So why should we be doing something that we're not party to for all this climate stuff?
It's a very good point, Malcolm. I think a lot of people will agree with you. And it was actually Theresa May who originally brought in net zero, but of course it was enacted, I think, when Boris Johnson became leader. Peter in Croydon says, afternoon, Peter. Sir Keith is a comedian as well as a trader. He did sound rattled. I have images of those spitting image MPs ruling about laughing in the Commons. Carry on, Nigel, I say. Colleen says, how can Starmer do a speech about Farage asking if he can be trusted with the mess Labour have managed to create in 10 months? I think it's time Starmer resigned and took his cabinet with him. Peter says, Betty, he's right. Other than mortgage holders, no effect. My pension went up 15% thanks to trust. People are financially illiterate in the UK and believe anything the BBC or papers tell them. Reeves did more damage to GDP, economy and national debt, and the pension grab will finish off the country. Betty, you're right in that I think Rachel Reeves has not managed the economy well, but it is absolutely not the case that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng did not crash the economy. They absolutely did, and I fundamentally disagree with you and Julian Jessup, because the facts are there. Things got catastrophically worse economically very, very quickly under Liz Truss. That's why she had to resign. That's why Kwasi Kwarteng was sacked, and he created a huge amount of uncertainty. They sacked the permanent secretary of the Treasury. They did all sorts of things in regard to the Bank of England. They did tax cuts that were unfunded. They changed their mind. He said there's more to come. There are all sorts of reasons why they were a terrible government, why Kwasi Kwarteng is the worst chancellor this country has ever had. And that includes Rachel Reeves. Brad in Cambridge says, I cannot believe Starmer had the nerve to stand in front of the camera and ask if we could trust Nigel Farage. This is the same man who stood before the electorate and lied through his teeth on numerous occasions. We certainly know just who we can't trust, says Brad. Lots to discuss on this, including with the Shadow Crime Policing and Fire Minister Matt Vickers. We, from the Conservatives, will talk to him as well about that video from Robert Jenrick that's got us all talking today. Stay with us here on Talk.
What are they arguing about? What are our complicity in the deaths in Gaza? It's something about arms sales, I think. I mean, the UK sells a negligible amount of arms to Israel by comparison to...
They're less than 1% of the arms that Israel uses.
Something like that. I mean, the thing that I like about all this is imagining Benjamin Netanyahu picking up the phone and saying, what, Benedict Cumberbatch wants me to stop the war?
Well, in that case... yes, I won't worry about the safety of my nation and my people from a terrorist organisation on my doorstep. Benedict Cumberbatch has spoken.
Exactly. Forget the hostages, it's Sherlock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who's been in touch, and we'll get to more of your messages very soon. Becca says Starmer needs to get out of the London bubble and look at real people with real issues. He would argue he's done that. He's gone to St Helens today. He's talked to factory workers. Surely they're real people with real issues. Maybe you agree with that, maybe you don't. Leslie says Starmer constantly blames Truss. Now Farage, when is he going to accept the mistakes he and Reeves have made in just 10 months? Well, we will ask Matt Vickers, the Shadow Crime Policing and Fire Minister, about all of that in just a second. But I just want to talk about something earlier today. The Shadow Justice Secretary, Matt's colleague, Robert Jenrick, decided to take matters in his own hands with fare evaders on the London Underground. Let's have a look at this.
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? Do you want to go back and pay like everybody else? Do you think it's all right not to pay? Why don't you go back and pay? You can say off as much as you want. Oh, no, but everyone else has to pay. You're carrying a knife, you say? Nearly 1 in 25 people using London's public transport aren't paying for it. So there's 8 officers down there, but 1 minute away, that gate's wide open. It's also just annoying watching so many people break the law and get away with it. Or at least most of it. Right, should we go over here to these guys here? Excuse me, gents. Hello, hello. You're on camera, mate. You're bang to rights. Just step to the side. All right, thanks very much, guys. It's the same with bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops. It's all chipping away at society. The state needs to reassert itself and go after lawbreakers.
In the last hour, Robert Jenrick has spoken to my colleague Ian Collins here on Talk about why he decided to shine a light on this.
Sometimes you've got to get out of a suit, get out of Westminster, frankly, and shame the authorities into doing things. And I was just fed up seeing people dodging their fares, not just on the London Underground, but all over the country. I represent a community up in Nottinghamshire, and I've seen it there as well. And I felt that something had to be done. And so I've done this video. There's been a massive reaction to it. And now, at least in London, I want Sadiq Khan, our do-nothing mayor, to step up, pull his finger out and get to work.
Well, Robert Jenrick's colleague Matt Vickers is the Shadow Crime Policing and Fire Minister and also the Conservative MP for Stockton West. Matt, will you be doing the same thing?
Good afternoon. Well, he talks about getting out of his suit and getting into his casual. The one thing that was criminal there was his shirt.
It's sort of lumberjacky, wasn't it?
Was something else.
He certainly got people talking, and not just about the shirt. This is a politician as you don't often see them. Will you be doing something similar?
We're happy to get amongst the issues as they affect people, get out on the street and see what's going on there and listen to what's affecting them. But actually, he shone a light on a really serious issue. 1 in 25 people evading fares. That is just unbelievable, isn't it? And it's an affront to society. It's an affront to law-abiding citizens who go about their daily lives and get on with the job. But also, there's a huge cost involved there. £240 million. Imagine the difference that could be making to our public transport system. Imagine if that money was actually going into policing and better policing. Imagine if that was going into our local NHS. Imagine if it was going to all those pensioners who'd lost their winter fuel. There's a big financial cost to this, as well as the complete affront to civil society and to law-abiding citizens across the country.
So if you became Crime Minister, if you got executive office in government, what would you do differently to what the government is doing at the moment to crack down on these people?
I think there's two things. I think firstly, well, as Robert was pointing out in his videos, it didn't look particularly like the officers who were responsible for dealing with that were being very effective. So I think we've got to have a look at the role that people are playing and try to make it a priority that those people who are there to do that job of preventing those people evading their fares are doing so. But actually, there's a piece in Robert's brief around sentencing. We've seen what the government have brought forward this week on sentencing, on reducing sentences by sizable amounts, and also some of those short sentences, making them community-based. I think that's wrong. People have to feel the harshness of the law. They have to see the tough face of the law and see real consequences. These little things tend to lead to much bigger things. The people who do these things on day one go on to commit much more serious crimes if they see getting away with it. We've seen zero tolerance policing. We need to crack down on these small things so that society has a respect for law and order and for the rule of law.
I totally get that. I live in London. I have a job that is a good one, and I am not pretending for a second that I have my finger on the pulse of what every single person in this country thinks, but neither does any politician really. But I can honestly, and Twitter is not Britain, and I get that, but I think I've heard more today about this video than anything else the Conservatives have done in the last 10 months or anything Kemi Badenoch has said or done. What do you think that says, Matt?
I think, do you know what? It's very hard to get you guys' attention. It's down to you journalists to start paying a bit more attention.
You're welcome any time in this programme, Matt.
In the last few weeks, we've seen the crime and policing bill go through. There's lots of very important amendments. One around stop and search and making it easier for the police to stop and search people. That should be a big discussion. You should be featured on your show, but it didn't feature on many of these shows.
We have talked about it.
They're really listening to us. They're consumed by a lot of the mess that the Labour Party are making. They're consumed by what the polls are saying. But actually, we've got to keep making the case. I think Robert's a very effective communicator. I think he's done a great job today of highlighting this situation, holding those responsible to account, and holding hopefully the authorities like Sadiq to account and making them pull their finger out and look at this again.
Two words you haven't mentioned out of that answer, Matt. Kemi Badenoch.
Kemi, do you know what? You guys need to start paying more attention to her. She's out there. She's making the case. She's reviewing. We got a good kick in the last general election. We've got to go away and learn some lessons. Rightly, that's what we're doing. Kemi's out there listening to people, engaging with the public, seeing what they're thinking. And she's also been out on broadcast, taking the questions and the answers. You guys need to give her a bit more coverage.
I mean, I think we've given her plenty of coverage. She's welcome in this studio anytime she likes. What do you think of what the Prime Minister has said today, that Farage is Liz Truss all over again?
Well, I find it bizarre. Well, firstly, Farage has made a lot of spending commitments overnight. He's finding all this money, this magic money tree. He's becoming the next Jeremy Corbyn. He's promising.
He says they're all funded. He says he's going to cut DEI, he's going to cut Quangos, he's going to make sure immigration goes down, and that's where the money comes from. He gave quite a detailed answer at his press conference yesterday when asked about this.
They're very big numbers, but when you say, some of those things that aren't necessarily worked out, he talks about cutting certain things, but he doesn't look at the consequences of what will replace them. If you stop spending on immigrants who are arriving illegally, you have to put more into policing to prevent that stuff happening, into enforcement, into the border agency, etc. These figures have not been worked out, and I think he also conceded that when he was asked, that he would be questioned about this and these big, huge numbers that he's waving around. In fact, the one that's got everybody's attention in my part of the world is the one about the two-child benefit cap, the removal of that. We saw what used to happen years ago. We saw that horrendous case of people with, dozen kids who were getting 40-odd £1,000 a year in benefits. People find that wrong. Families who are making difficult choices, young families looking at whether they can afford to have children or not, do not want to therefore be paying into a tax system that gives others an endless access to benefits.
Why should a child be condemned to a life of poverty simply because they're the third or fourth child?
There are lots of other means in which we support families rather than just giving a cheque. That might mean through the social...
Surely child benefit is the main way that happens.
Yeah. It's not just child benefit, it's benefits. Opening the door on benefits at large. That's to working families out there who are now paying the highest taxes, the taxes at the highest level since the Second World War.
Yeah, and that happened under the Conservatives as well, Matt. That was the fact under the Conservatives as well. Now, Labour have put taxes up, not disputing that point, but under the government that your party was part of, those taxes went up to the highest point in nearly 80 years.
In response to the pandemic, taxes went up to pay down some of that debt. But actually, look at what's happening now with our economy. Taxes are at their highest level since the Second World War. Inflation, it was at 2%. It was on target. It's now to 3.4%. That hurts working people who are having to pay more for everything they pay for. But worse than that, the one thing that's crushing ambition, crushing opportunities for young people out there is the fact that unemployment is going up. That's real people wanting to earn a wage. They want to go and get a decent job, take money home to the family. They want to have the aspirations of getting a great job and getting out there and getting amongst it. Those things are all going down because of Rachel Reeves is destroying our economy. Anybody who goes out there and creates jobs is now getting slammed with Labour's jobs tax. Anybody who owns a small pub, a small shop in a high street, their business rates financially are now doubled. They are being taxed to death. If you tax anybody who tries to have a bit of ambition, create jobs, create a bit of economic growth, they stop doing it. It's just a disaster. The economy is in a really, really bad place, and it's in a much worse place than it's been for a very long time, for no reason other than Labour's ideology of give everything to unions. Strike, we'll give you another pay rise, we'll give you another pay rise. We saw these ridiculous things. They're making the wrong choices. They promised people no rise in council tax, not a penny more. Everybody across the country is now paying increases in council tax.
Just one more thing. Okay, just one more thing I want to ask you about was this Talk exclusive story about fly tipping becoming the new county lines. Crooks cashing in on the waste racket. Organised waste crime has reached record levels as crooks are cashing in on industrial scale fly tipping, which has been dubbed Britain's new county lines. Gangs are making millions of pounds a year by illegally dumping enormous loads of rubbish across Britain, facing few deterrents, leaving hard-working taxpayers to foot the clean-up bill. What would you do to prevent this and to stop this?
Yeah, it's the ultimate kick in the teeth, isn't it? Somebody's bringing rubbish, dumping it on someone else's doorstep in their community, in their green spaces. Huge impact on wildlife, on nature, on the environment, and just generally making a hell of a mess that other people then have to live around. It's an awful situation. We actually brought forward an amendment to a bill the other week around this, around the fact that those people who are caught, obviously we recently saw the fines go up significantly for doing this. We saw the fines for littering go up significantly in recent years. But how do you get further on with that? You actually slam them with points on their driving licence. We brought an amendment forward on that front for people who dump rubbish from the back of a vehicle, for people who, in fact, we were including people who toss stuff out of a window. Give them a fine on their licence. If they keep doing this, they're going to lose their driving licence. They're going to lose the ability to drive around and do these dreadful, heinous things.
Okay, Matt, thank you very much. That is Matt Vickers there. He's the Shadow Crime Policing and Fire Minister, the Conservative MP for Stockton West as well. Appreciate his contribution today and yours as well. Stuart's been in touch and says, Keir Starmer has been congratulated this week by China for the Chagos deal and last week by Hamas. His good friends are not ideal bedfellows. Mark in Caterham says, fair evasion really angers me. I pay £3,100 a year to travel into London and every day see people pushing through barriers. When people try and push behind me, I push them back through the barrier. But another issue is the useless Transport for London and station staff who sit at gates watching it happen. If they aren't revenue officers, then replace them with people who can stop these scumbags. That's what is the point of those officers. Transport for London just rely on me and others paying for others. Glenn says, sorry Cardwell, but Liz Truss did not crash the economy. The Governor of the Bank of England to save his side and the blob, including her own party plus the civil service, the BBC and the lefty side of the commentariat crashed the economy. Truss's analysis of the UK troubles was completely correct. Sorry, you're totally wrong. You're just completely factually wrong. Adrian Baird in Buckhurst Hill says, you are fact blind. Liability-driven investments drove up bond yields at the time of the Liz Truss budget, and even their effect has been dwarfed by movements over the last year. One day, Peter, you will wake up and smell the coffee, listen to what Julian said again and learn. Best wishes for a good show, Adrian. Adrian, I'm not denying that things have got worse in the economy in the last year. I'm not saying that for a second. What I am saying is that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng crashed the economy. That is a fact. Ash of Lancashire, who's a Gulf veteran, says Starmer made a complete idiot of himself today and in front of the people. Yesterday, John McDonnell called for a challenge to Starmer's leadership. Front page of The Guardian today, Ash, maybe you're reading that. Rebecca Long-Bailey is the only popular one. She missed out. She's the one that the unions would work with. But unfortunately, the Labour government is over, bar the shouting, which is beginning. And they, along with the Tories, will be relegated to third and fourth position to Farage and the Liberal Democrats' possible official opposition. Interesting thoughts there, Ash. And final one before the break, Betty says, a crash would have required a bailout from the IMF like the UK had to get in the 70s and the damage was done, net minimal impact to GDP per capita than Labour have done in the last 10 months. If the media had not panicked, the markets would have had less drama. Its scale is 40% of change, Farage proposes, so pick your horse, please. It was not the media that crashed the economy, it was Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. Those are the facts. That's what happened. That's what happened. Okay, I'm sorry. I can't say anything other than those are the facts. You may disagree with me. You may think I'm wrong, but I'm factually right. That is what happened. That's why she resigned. That's why Kwasi Kwarteng was sacked. That's why the markets went crazy. That she sacked the head of the Treasury. You know, there are all sorts of things that happened that were dreadful, including Kwasi Kwarteng saying in an interview that there was more change to come. Completely spooked the markets. There was nothing to do with the media. It was nothing to do with the left-wing establishment. It was nothing to do with the blob. It was to do with Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss mismanaging the economy. Those are historical facts. In a minute, we're going to talk to Sam Hall, who's the director of the Conservative Environment Network, about the drought declared in northwest England and people being warned that drinking water could run out in some areas in just 10 years, thanks to, guess what, immigration. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody for being in touch. We'll get to more of your calls and messages in just a minute. We're going to talk to Sam Hall now. He's director of the Conservative Environment Network, because British people are being warned drinking water could run out in some areas in just 10 years thanks to mass immigration, and a drought has been declared in northwest England. It is very nice weather at the moment, but these things don't happen overnight. Sam, why is this happening? You're very welcome to the programme, by the way.
Good afternoon, Peter. Well, I think there's a combination of factors behind this. Firstly, as you said in your introduction, we've massively increased our population, largely through uncontrolled immigration, and that has led to more demand for water coming through. We've built a lot more homes as well, so linked to the increased number of people. The third factor, though, is climate change. We are seeing greater extremes of weather. We've just had the driest spring in 50 years, and that came off the back of the wettest 18 months we've had on record the previous year. So we're seeing these periods of incredibly intense rainfall and these periods of very little rainfall at all, and we're not very good at managing them. And linked to that, we've not built a new reservoir in this country since the 1990s.
I think it was 1992 the last time a major reservoir happened. I mean, that's disgraceful, isn't it? We've had a population explosion of 10 million people thanks to mass immigration. We're in a situation where we have all sorts of pressures, as you're outlining very well, Sam, on the system, essentially, both getting water to people and taking it away. Why have successive governments, clearly not just Conservative, but Labour as well, why have they not got to grips with this? Why did they not say, hold on a second, more people, let's build a reservoir?
Well, I think it is a very depressing state of affairs. It's bad for people who are having to face these sorts of restrictions, things like hosepipe bans. It's bad for our farmers who don't have the water they need to irrigate crops and produce food in sufficient quantities to keep prices low in the shops. And it's bad for our natural environment as well. Our rivers and lots of our habitats that wildlife rely on need lots of supply of water. In terms of why it's not happened, I think there has been a reluctance to go ahead with new reservoirs, partly because of local opposition. I think how a lot of reservoirs have been built in the past haven't always been built to those sorts of standards that make them popular for local people. So, I would like to see much more effort go into building reservoirs that people can walk their dogs around and take their family to.
I'd also like to see a lot of local communities being told, no, we're doing this anyway.
I think there could definitely be a role for that. I think we spend too long in consultation, and the planning process takes far too long as well. And that's not just true with reservoirs as well. I think we also make it far too difficult for farmers to install reservoirs on their land. These small ponds and small reservoirs that they can create on their land that help them meet the demand for water for watering their crops also have to go through planning permission, which adds a lot of time and cost to the system. So there's a huge amount we could be doing to speeding up the planning process, as well as making these reservoirs nice places so they don't get that local backlash from residents.
We've had a couple of statements from a couple of water companies. We've contacted quite a few of them today. Some of them have got back to us and some of them haven't. I'm just going to read out two of them, Sam, and I wonder what your thoughts are on them. Southern Water says, with climate change and population growth putting pressure on the amount of water in our environment, we all need to play our part to make sure there's enough to go around. We'd like to encourage customers to consider how much water they're using, especially during warm weather. Small changes like taking shorter showers, using a watering can instead of a hosepipe, or turning off the tap when you brush your teeth can make a big difference. Anglian Water on Drought says it's time to love your brown lawn. Leave the sprinkler in the shed this summer. Grass is extremely hard to kill. Your lawn will soon bounce back and be vibrant and green once the rain comes. What do you make of those suggestions anyway from water companies?
Well, I think people will want to see water companies leading first before they make lifestyle changes, as you just described there. I think.
Well, especially when you look at Thames Water, which has just been fined 122 million quid for dumping a load of sewage in clean water areas.
Exactly. I think people want to see water companies dealing with the leaks. They want to see water companies building reservoirs and actually getting on with building the resources that mean that we don't have to have these sorts of restrictions. Of course, if people want to reduce some of their water bills by reducing consumption and finding those efficiencies, then I think that should be their choice. But I think water companies' job should be to provide sufficient quantities of water so people don't have to make those restrictions, and people ultimately have the choice to use the water that they need.
Jane makes a really good point. She's texted it in and she says, are these new houses that the government's building, 1.5 million is their target anyway, are they going to have water, or will they've run out before they're built? I mean, it's a fair point to say if you're building a load more properties, you're going to need the infrastructure and the water to get to those properties.
Definitely. I think we have to get on with building reservoirs and generally building out our water infrastructure if we're going to accommodate all the new housing that's going to be built as a result of the government's planning ambitions. It's absolutely essential as well that we do what we can with our farmers to help them store more water in the land. I think there's a big risk with what the government's planning to do in terms of cutting the farming budget. So that would have provided some incentives for farmers to create things like ponds and reservoirs on their farmland to store more of the water in their soil that could help us meet some of these challenges and play parts of a role. So, the government has made some announcements today around going ahead with new reservoirs, which I think are welcome, but they risk undermining that work badly by some of the decisions they're going to be making at the spending review in a couple of weeks' time.
Sam, thank you. That's Sam Hall, Director of the Conservative Environment Network, and we will, of course, have full coverage of that spending review, what it means for you and what it means for public services when it happens on, I think, the 11th of June. It's certainly a Wednesday anyway. I'm pretty sure that's the 11th. Daniel is in Epsom and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Daniel, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Pete. I love the show.
Thank you.
I just want to say, is this really about water? Because there are currently about 72 million people, at least, in this country trying to use an infrastructure which is fit for about 50 million people.
You make a very good point there, Daniel, that there are many more people in the country than there were, for example, when we built the last reservoir in 1992.
Yeah, well, when I remember this country before 1997, right? I'm 48. So I was in my mid to late teens in 97, and I can remember the country, and I can remember that it was much more homogenous, that it was a lot safer. There were visibly less people. I'm from London, but there was visibly less people around, and that was noticeable and tangible, right? Now, Tony Blair came in. Let's rub the noses of the right in diversity, and he started up this mass immigration that no one ever ever asked for or voted for or wanted. Now, 30 odd years later, we're here. And it's not just the water, is it? It's the roads are oversubscribed. There's nowhere for our children to live. The doctors and hospitals are overrun.
It's everything. And the government says it's going to build 1.5 million new homes. Is there going to be the water? Is there going to be the electricity? Are there going to be the schools? Are there going to be the hospitals? Is the road structure there? You're making really good points, Daniel. And the fact is that we have, we do, in theory, have room for 72 million people. There are lots of parts of this country that are not very populated, like large parts of Scotland, for example. I'm not saying that necessarily they need to be populated, but you're absolutely right in that the infrastructure of this country is not built for the huge number of people who are here.
Yeah, but Peter, let me ask you a question. It's not just about the numbers. It's just that the majority of Britons, this is the problem with the current Labour government and the last Conservative government. The majority of Britons in Britain today didn't ever want or ask for these levels of immigration over the past 20 or 30 years. In actual fact, we specifically asked successive governments to stop it, and we didn't want it.
And it's worse than that, Daniel. It's worse than that, because what happened was we were promised by successive governments that it would go down. The Conservatives in 2010, 2015, 2017, 2019 and in 2024 said they would get immigration down. In 14 years in government, they didn't get it down. And when Tony Blair came into government in 1997, net migration in this country was about 75,000. Now it's nearly 10 times that.
Yeah, so how can they have that? That's why the British majority, people like me, are going to vote reform, because the Con Lab Uniparty is over. Let me ask you a question, Peter. If you had a flood in your house right now, right, would you rush out and buy loads of extra towels to quell that flood? Would you quickly get bowls to try and fill up those bowls quickly, or would you just turn the tap off? Right? You'd rush upstairs and turn the tap off.
It's an arresting metaphor there, Daniel, for the problem that remains, and thank you for it. That's Daniel in Epsom. Some breaking news now on Talk, and Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has said that his country has accepted the US envoy Steve Witkoff's new Gaza ceasefire proposal. That is according to Israeli media. That is a major, major change in what is happening in the Middle East. That is Benjamin Netanyahu saying that Israel has accepted Steve Witkoff's new Gaza ceasefire proposal. That is something that Hamas accepted a few days ago. Israel initially rejected it. It'll be very interesting to see exactly what has happened there. This is a major change in the Middle East. A ceasefire could ensue. Could this be finally the end of the war there? Could those hostages come home? Could the humanitarian crisis in Gaza be perhaps not ending, but the beginning of the end? We're going to put all those questions to Sean Bell, the military analyst, in just a few minutes. Stay with us here on Talk.
What are they arguing about? What our complicity in the deaths in Gaza?
It's something about arms sales, I think. I mean, the UK sells a negligible amount of arms to Israel by comparison
They're less than 1% of the arms that Israel uses.
Something like that. I mean, the thing that I like about all this is imagining Benjamin Netanyahu picking up the phone and saying, "What, Benedict Cumberbatch wants me to stop the war?"
Well, in that case... yes, I won't worry about the safety of my nation and my people from a terrorist organisation on my doorstep. Benedict Cumberbatch has spoken.
Exactly. Forget the hostages, it's Sherlock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're just reacting in the newsroom to Benjamin Netanyahu's interesting thoughts here. He said Israel has now accepted the US envoy Steve Witkoff's new Gaza ceasefire proposal. That's according to the Israeli media. Sean Bell is a military analyst and a former fighter pilot. Sean, thank you for coming on so quickly as a reaction to that breaking news. I really appreciate it. Sean, perhaps you could tell us what the deal is and why you think Netanyahu has now accepted it, having it previously, a few days ago, having been apparently rejected.
Well, yeah, these proposals and counter-proposals keep flying across the table. I've been desperately trying to find out what the deal looks like at the moment, and we can certainly talk about that. I mean, it does look like a 60-day halt in the fighting. It looks like the 9 of the living hostages would get released. Half of those that are dead would also be released. It would happen in 2 phases, but we're not entirely sure, potentially over a week. But there are some really interesting sub-clauses to this, one of which is if the Israelis believe that negotiations break down, they can get back into the fighting again. And Hamas, we're already hearing, almost certainly will reject this. And I think the problem is what we're seeing here, Peter, is that everybody wants some form of peace to sort of settle in the Middle East. But at the moment, the two sides are a long way apart.
So just go back a bit, Sean. Remind us what Hamas wanted earlier in the week and how that differs from what we think we've got now.
So the original it was different numbers of days, it was different number of hostages, it was different periods of time. But actually the detail, in a way, doesn't matter. What Hamas is doing is playing for time. What they're trying to do is stop Israeli fighting. They're trying to buy themselves time because they know that every day, every week, every month this war goes on, the international community, public opinion is shifting away from Israel and more to sympathy with the Palestinians, particularly the humanitarian crisis, the number of dead bodies in Gaza, and the desperate situation for food. So Hamas is buying time. What Israel wants to do is it wants to try to make sure that it basically gets rid of Hamas, either destroys them in situ or gets them to agree to leave the Gaza Strip. So at the moment, every time a proposal gets put on the table that pauses the fighting, Israel looks with a deep degree of skepticism at it because it just sees this as a Hamas effort to delay. So because Steve Witkoff's put it on the table, and therefore as the US envoy, it's no surprise that Israel's accepted it initially at least, but knowing probably that it won't be acceptable to Hamas.
It's interesting as well in that Israel's two stated aims at the start of all this, as you intimate there, we're getting all the hostages back. We know that 58, we don't know how many are alive, we don't know how many are dead, are in Gaza at the moment. We also know that, as you say, they wanted to end Hamas control of Gaza, whether that was militarily or whether that was them being exiled to somewhere like Qatar, where a number of the Hamas leaders are. It's interesting as well, Sean, that, and we've talked about this before, in regard to how some Hamas leaders, certainly in Qatar, seem to be more pro a deal. They seem to be more pro a ceasefire, whereas those who are in Gaza, including presumably until he was eliminated by Israel, Mohammed Sinwar, were for continuing to fight and elongating the campaign.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, isn't there, Peter? I mean, the fact that Israel keeps going after the leaders of Hamas, but Hamas is like a hydra. You chop off one head, another one will grow back. So in a way, I understand why Israel's doing that, but you're not going to kill Hamas by doing that. I think what's interesting is the core reasons why this conflict continues to rumble on is that both sides are completely polarized. And the fact remains is that we've heard today as well, Israel are expanding the number of settlements in the West Bank. Part of what Hamas is trying to do is find some route to a Palestinian state. That seems further away than anywhere now for the Israeli position. And therefore, with the US trying to broker some sort of ceasefire, likewise with the Middle East trying to find a way of bringing it to a halt. But bluntly, at the moment, we don't seem to be actually any closer. And despite the devastation that's being wreaked in Gaza, Hamas lives on. And that's very frustrating for the Israelis.
What happens now, do you think?
I predict that we'll carry on. I mean, I think you mentioned the two priorities for Israel, the hostages and Hamas. It's been really clear that over the last few months that destroying Hamas is by far and away the number one priority. And that's what's worried a lot of the families of those hostages that are still being held by Hamas. I predict that Hamas doesn't need that many hostages. One or two is enough. It will use those as a currency for playing for even more time. And meanwhile, Israel will have more and more pressure applied to try and get the aid back up to 600 trucks a day so that we can start to ease the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, it's interesting from Netanyahu's perspective. He's been under a lot of political pressure. There have been huge protests as well in Tel Aviv by many of the families and many others as well against his actions, saying that they want humanitarian things to be, humanitarian aspects to be the priority in Gaza. Certainly, how much political pressure do you think he is under? And certainly if an election were held, if Israel were not in a state of war, he'd be pretty vulnerable, wouldn't he?
He would, but the undercurrent of your question, I think, is, how much of this is Benjamin Netanyahu maintaining his power versus what actually he wants Israel to do. And I think that's a really troubling question, because the inevitable, one of the facets of that is he's doing this to try and placate and keep himself in power. You talk to me, I'm currently in Prague at a conference out here, a relatively private one, but just literally listen to the Israelis talk about their perspective. And I do think it's a very, very complex situation out here. If you don't solve the problem, every few years this pops up again.
Absolutely.
And therefore, putting a sticky plaster over the top of it, it might look good politically in the near term, but doesn't actually solve the problem. The challenge is there's much smarter people than I that still haven't managed to find the solution, but getting the Middle East involved, getting Saudi involved, getting America involved, and tackling the real issue, not the symptoms, ultimately is the only way to get this addressed.
Yes, perhaps not that hard to believe, Sean, that we can't solve the Middle East problem during the course of this conversation between the two of us. But another story, we talked about Hamas there, obviously, and those terrorists and horrendous people were celebrating and indeed congratulating David Lammy and Keir Starmer for their particular position against Israel previously. Now the Chinese government has welcomed Sir Keir Starmer's deal on the Chagos Islands as a massive achievement, despite his claim that Beijing had opposed it. Give us the detail of this, Sean.
Well, this is grand strategy here, and this is lovely. I love the details behind this, because China has got its own strategic objectives in the South China Sea, lots of islands that are sort of subject to who owns what, and building airfields and military bases. China would have loved Mauritius to have actually spurned the UK approaches, and they would have therefore done a similar sort of deal. But rather than alienate Mauritius, what they've actually done is said, well done, UK, because you've now set a precedent. You've set a precedent that you don't own those islands, but with a bit of money, you can secure access to them. I wouldn't be at all surprised. China thinks not in weeks and months, it thinks in years and decades. We're going to see some of this play out on the international stage as they make a play for some of the disputed islands around their territories, and they'll be throwing money at it because they know that the UK has now set a precedent.
And speaking of that, it's also been confirmed by Beijing's ambassador to Mauritius that in a remarkable turn of events that no one could have seen coming at all, Mauritius will soon join Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, despite claims from the UK government that the East African nation island was not under Chinese influence. Guess what? They were.
I just think every time you turn a page on here, I mean, we see it as a title and a headline, but actually the politics behind it, if you just
Has Keir Starmer been had here? Has he been had?
I don't think so. If you look at it very parochially and without having a history lesson, the UK, we haven't got a very proud history of how we ended up with the Chagos Islands. Bluntly, we were forced by the international community to negotiate. We have secured it, 99-year deal, but my goodness, we're paying a lot of money for it. 30 billion might not sound much if you look at it over 100 years, but if you look at it as a chunk of money, it's double the Mauritian GDP. It's a huge influence for them, and therefore, but it doesn't stop. That one deal doesn't stop them talking to China and other people along the way. If you look at this purely from a Chagos perspective, I think it's probably the right answer. Strategically, Diego Garcia is a really important base, not only for us, but also America. But don't think we suddenly buy Mauritius backing by doing a deal like this. We don't.
Sean, thank you. Appreciate you coming on earlier than planned as well, because of that breaking news that Benjamin Netanyahu has said Israel has accepted the US envoy Steve Witkoff's new Gaza ceasefire proposal. Not quite the same one as Hamas had accepted earlier in the week. The negotiation continues. We'll see what happens there. Please, please, for goodness sake, let's just make sure there is some sort of ceasefire here, some end to the violence, the humanitarian catastrophe, and get those hostages returned and Hamas out of Gaza, because they're doing absolutely nothing for their people apart from causing complete misery. Thank you to Amanda, who says it's really very simple. It would save a council money if they got their act together and made it simple and inexpensive for people to dispose of waste and unwanted items. Very good point, Amanda. We'll talk more about that and all the politics of the day in just a second here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, it's just gone 5 o'clock. This is Peter Cardwell here with Talk Drive. Thank you so much for your company. There's a lot to discuss, and in just a few minutes' time, we're going to go live to Liverpool because there's a press conference in relation to that road traffic incident on Water Street the other day, on Monday evening. The Assistant Chief Constable Jenny Sims and the Chief Crown Prosecutor for the Crown Prosecution Service for Mersey and Cheshire, Sarah Hammond, will give that press conference. Got a live shot of it on the screen now. If you're watching, we'll go there as soon as that starts. In the meantime, we're going to talk to Richard Holden, who is the Shadow Paymaster General, member of the Shadow Cabinet, about all matters political. Because earlier today, the Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick decided to take matters in his own hands with fare evaders. We'll look into that. We'll ask you about that as well. I want to make sure you get your voice on the air between now and 7 o'clock. We're talking about junior doctors. Have they lost your support? They're asking for a 22% pay rise, a 29% pay rise over and above the 22% they got previously. We'll get a sports update this hour as well. Talk about the Chagos Islands and indeed fly tipping. It's an absolute scourge. I'm sure you've seen it in your area. Well, now criminal gangs are making a huge amount of money from it. They're collecting litter, they're collecting rubbish, they're charging people for it, and then they're just dumping it in fields and on byways. It's a horrendous thing. Tell us your experience, your thoughts, whatever your insight is, let me know. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. So stay with us here on Talk. Well, as I say, those voice notes are a great thing. You can send them via WhatsApp and simply go to WhatsApp, send us a voice note the same way you'd send it to anybody else. 0344 499 1000 is the number that you can send it through on. Ian has sent me one on Keir Starmer and what he's been saying today.
Good afternoon, Peter. It's Ian from East Grinstead. I have to laugh when I hear Starmer talking about trust, whether you can trust Nigel Farage, because he's proven himself to be the most untrustworthy Prime Minister politician we've ever had. And he's questioned Nigel Farage's trustworthiness. I mean, the guy's completely lost his rocker. So Farage has come out and shown how he'll cost these things, which is more than can be said for Starmer and the gang, because they just refused. Well, they said everything was fully costed, then guess what? It wasn't. So talk about trust and lying. I mean, what is wrong with the man? He's unfit for office.
I think those are very, very good points, Ian. I think a lot of people feel the same way, and certainly who you trust is a major, major aspect of all of this. Is it Keir Starmer? Is it Nigel Farage? Maybe it's Kemi Badenoch. One man who trusts her is Richard Holden. We'll talk to him in just a second, because we're going to reflect on what earlier today Richard Holden's Shadow Cabinet colleague, Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, did. He decided to take matters in his own hands with fare evaders on the London Underground.
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? Do you want to go back and pay like everybody else? Do you think it's all right not to pay? Why don't you go back and pay? You can say off as much as you want. But everyone else has to pay. You're carrying a knife, you say? Nearly 1 in 25 people using London's public transport aren't paying for it. So there's 8 officers down there, but 1 minute away, that gate's wide open. It's also just annoying watching so many people break the law and get away with it. Or at least most of the time. Right, should we go over here to these guys here? Excuse me, gents. Hello, hello. You're on camera, mate. You're banged to rights. Just step to the side. All right, thanks very much, guys. It's the same with bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops. It's all chipping away at society. The state needs to reassert itself and go after lawbreakers.
Well, earlier this afternoon, my colleague Ian Collins spoke to Robert Jenrick on Talk about why he decided to do this.
Sometimes you've got to get out of a suit, get out of Westminster, frankly, and shame the authorities into doing things. And I was just fed up seeing people dodging their fares, not just on the London Underground, but all over the country. I represent a community up in Nottinghamshire, and I've seen it there as well. and I felt that something had to be done. And so I've done this video. There's been a massive reaction to it, and now, at least in London, I want Sadiq Khan, our do-nothing mayor, to step up, pull his finger out and get to work.
Richard Holden is with us now. He is a Conservative MP, Shadow Paymaster General. And Richard, I wonder, in Basildon and Billericay, will you be going to the local station and holding them to account?
Well, honestly, for my constituents, many of whom commute into London on a daily basis, they see this sort of fare evasion all the time, and they are as fed up with it as everybody else is. And I'm just really glad that Robert's sort of highlighting some of these big issues that, you know, really affect so many people right up and down the country. And he's right to say it's not just about fare evasion, it's about other things as well. It's about those people taking drugs in our town centres with seeming impunity as well. And I think it's exactly right that we should be highlighting these issues, particularly when it comes to things like fare evasion, which the rest of the country is paying for, when people are getting away with it. And it feels like this isn't the focus of the Mayor of London, and it should be when he's in charge of transport and policing.
It's not just about London, though. It's right around the country, and I know loads of people who have reacted to this. I don't want to call it a stunt, I don't want to trivialise it, because it is a very, very good thing. It's highlighted a big issue. Lots of people are talking about it. We're talking about it today. A lot of our viewers and listeners have got in touch about it. In fact, I think in the last 10 months it's the thing that I have heard most about in regard to what the Conservatives have opposed and done and made clear. Are these kind of things going to be continued by members of the Shadow Cabinet?
I really hope so, and it's great to see actually Robert and some of the other members of the Shadow Cabinet going and taking these things out there, actually reflecting the concerns of normal people up and down the country. What they people really are concerned about this stuff, and it's only when I think sometimes politicians get out of Westminster, and you can make as many speeches as you want, as Robert said, and he does make speeches about this stuff as well. But I think showing that you're out there and involved is also really important. I think it's great to see Kemi's been out there touring the country. It's great to see Rob on this, and also he's been doing a lot on tool theft as well. A massive issue for my Basildon constituents. Many of those traditional white van men who have a lot of money invested in their tools and in their vans, and the theft and issues that go on around that. Things which haven't been, I don't think, treated as seriously as they should have been by the police. I think people want to feel that if you do work hard and do the right thing, right, you pay your way, that you're looked after in society. And I think particularly in some areas around the edges, and actually fare dodging is just one of them. People feel that people are getting away with stuff that they just wouldn't have been able to get away with not that long ago.
I think we've got to ask the question. I think you're right, Richard. I think we've got to ask the question: what's the reward for actually playing by the rules? Because so many people feel there isn't one. You mentioned tool theft there. You probably don't know this because it's a very little known fact, but Keir Starmer is actually the son of a tool maker. He has been in the northwest of England today in St Helens. He's been talking about Nigel Farage, and he says that Liz Truss, Farage would be Liz Truss all over again. The disastrous economic policies of her government would be repeated if Nigel Farage became Prime Minister. Do you agree with him?
Well, I think what we're seeing at the moment is some disastrous economic policies from the Labour Party. They came in promising a huge amount, and what they've actually done is taken us back to square one. We can see with interest rates rising on government debt, far in excess of where they were under the last Conservative administration, at any point under the last Conservative administration. We're seeing some real issues there, which are also going to lead to tax rises even further across the country, because Labour have totally lost control of the public finances, and it's a real issue that he, I think, has brought on himself. And if anybody's comparing themselves to those who've not performed as well as they should have done, I think Keir Starmer should be taking a long, hard look in the mirror. We all know very well his opinion poll ratings at the moment are absolutely appalling, and there's a reason for that, and it's because people don't trust him on the economy. He said he wouldn't raise taxes. He's raised taxes. He's absolutely hammering small businesses right up and down the country. And now in constituencies like mine, we're now seeing some of my schools having to make jobs cuts to pay for the national insurance tax that he's imposing on them as well. It's absolutely outrageous, and people are seeing through it, and that's one of the reasons he's tanked more quickly than any other Prime Minister in the polls in living memory.
I should say to our viewers and listeners that we're just awaiting a press conference from Merseyside Police, and I'll apologise to you in advance, Richard, if we have to cut this interview short, but to go to that press conference, I'm sure you'll absolutely understand that our viewers and listeners are very keen to know what will be happening then. But in the meantime, Richard, you talked a lot about Labour in that last answer, and you talked about not trusting Keir Starmer. Do you trust Nigel Farage? Do you trust his economic plans?
Well, it's quite clear that Nigel, wants to have more benefits in the system. That's what he was. That's his big announcement this week. Is that benefits aren't enough in Britain for those people who are relying on universal credit. And to me, that's just the wrong way of approaching it. I want to see tax cuts for people who are working hard. That's what we were doing at the end of our time in office, starting to bring down some of those national insurance costs. I want to see us do more of that, encourage people off welfare and into work. It's something we did a huge amount of before the pandemic. About 1.3 million people who are on disability, off disability benefits and into work. That's what we should be concentrating on, not paying people not to work. And that seems like the wrong approach to me. It's quite clear that Farage sees some soft Labour votes there that he's trying to go after in some parts of the country. That's not where I think the Conservative Party should be. I think the Conservative Party, when it's at its best, is anchored on the side of working people. People get out there and work hard and want to put into the system. I think that's some of the great stuff we're seeing from Robert Jenrick recently, exactly on that space, exactly the right place where Kemi is. And I think Nigel Farage is chasing Labour voters at the moment in some parts of the country who, I don't want to get into a welfare battle between with Farage and Reform and the Labour Party. That's up to them. The Conservative Party is a party of working Britain, and that's where we should be firmly anchored.
Yet the tax take was the highest since the Second World War as a proportion of what the country makes when you were in Cabinet as the chairman of the Conservative Party.
And it's higher now. It's higher now, actually, Peter. Actually, it's higher now, and it would be higher if Farage goes in there and starts wanting to spend more money.
Do you think you think the tax take would actually go up under Nigel Farage's plan?
You're spending more money on benefits.
Well, he says he can find the money, and he gave quite a detailed answer to a journalist who asked him about this. He said he would find the money from scrapping DEI, from getting control of immigration, and getting control of quangos. He says he can make the sums add up.
I mean, he included in those quangos, he included things like, for example, national highways who build and maintain our road network. Now, I don't know whether, I was a roads minister, and I remember a lot of people complaining about potholes. We start slashing the road budget, I don't think we're going to get those potholes filled, and I don't think that's going to help the economy either. So I think you need to look at some of these things very carefully before you start to look into them. Look, I want to see people off welfare and into work, and I think that Nigel Farage's answer of more welfare is the wrong way to go. I want to see people rewarded for working hard, supporting their families. That's what we should be doing. And I really worry at the moment that actually we're seeing a competition on the left of British politics now with Farage trying to cannibalise some of that Labour vote, because he can see how.
But there's clear competition on the right. But Richard, there's clear competition on the right. Your party did abysmally in the local elections, and we saw the vote there that really went down for the Conservatives. Some of the recent polls down as low as 16%. Robert Jenrick may be getting through today, but Kemi Badenoch absolutely is not.
What I'd say on that is that it's quite clear when Reform are starting to now, there's some skin going onto the bones of the Reform agenda at the moment, and they are going after a welfare vote. That is not where the Conservative Party should be. We should be the party of working Britain, people who do the right thing, get out there and create wealth and go to work and do the right thing. I do not think we should be doing what Nigel Farage is doing at the moment, which is chasing after Labour votes in some of those areas when it's all about spending more money on welfare. I don't think that's the way to go.
Surely you need to take both Reform votes and Labour votes if the Conservatives are going to be anywhere at the next election, even if you're going to maintain your position as the opposition, never mind the government.
Yeah. No, what I would say on that is I think there's probably more votes up for grabs at the moment in the centre of British politics of those working people up and down the country who really don't know what to do at the moment. They're still they're still fed up with what the Conservative Party did over the last few years, the infighting that we had. I think there's a big issue there. I think they also want to see us to really understand their concerns around migration, where we should have done more in government. I think they're looking to Labour, who promised change and have comprehensively failed on that incredibly quickly in just a few months of office. And I think they're now looking at Farage and they're saying, what are they actually offering? Well, if they're offering more welfare, which means more taxes, I don't think that's going to be what they're after either. I think there's a lot for grabs at the moment. There's a long time to the next election. The Conservative Party needs to get into the right place on that, right across the board. Whether it comes
Would they be in a better place if Robert Jenrick was the leader?
I think Robert's a great part of the shadow cabinet. We've got a good shadow team. Mel Stride's been holding Rachel Reeves to account on a lot of these big issues.
Robert Jenrick is making more of an impact than Kemi Badenoch and Mel Stride put together, isn't he?
Look, I think all the cabinet and the shadow cabinet, will have their different strengths at different points, and some issues will be there.
Well, what are Kemi Badenoch's strengths? Because I think a lot of people are asking that question, Richard Holden. What are her strengths?
I think Kemi Badenoch's in exactly the right place. She won the party leadership just 6 months ago. She's got a way to go before the next election, and a lot of that is building. Is going to take a lot of rebuilding from where we were. We went down to our.
Well, what's she done so far? What's she actually done?
Well, I mean, one of the things she's absolutely been hugely leading on was all of the, you mentioned DEI. I mean, Nigel Farage talks about it. What did Kemi Badenoch do? She actually sorted all of that situation out with that major legal case taking the Scottish Government on around self-ID. She's been actually absolutely at the forefront of some of those issues when it comes to British politics. And she didn't snipe about it. She was actually a minister who got on and dealt with it. And a lot of some of those positives that we're seeing now are actually from some of the work she did in government. That's not to say that everything was perfect, because it certainly wasn't. We've got a long way to go yet, and a long way to go to regain that trust. But I still think we can do it. And I want to see what I want to see is the entire shadow cabinet all leaning in across the board and doing as much as we can to take Labour on every single issue.
Okay, Richard Holden, Shadow Paymaster General, Conservative MP for Basel and Billericay, thank you for joining me on Talk Drive. We are told we're just a few minutes away from the press conference in Liverpool. We know that the press conference is in relation to the road traffic incident in Water Street in Liverpool city centre, that horrendous event that injured so many people. The Assistant Chief Constable of Merseyside Police, Jenny Sims, is going to be talking. Chief Crown Prosecutor for the Crown Prosecution Service for Mersey and Cheshire, Sarah Hammond, will be there as well. In the meantime, Peter Blexley is with me, our crime commentator and former Metropolitan Police detective. We know that a suspect, this 53-year-old man, Peter, has been in custody for a long time. Well, longer than many perhaps would have been. What will have been happening over that time?
Well, the police, generally speaking, have 24 hours to detain someone, so that would have taken them up to 6 o'clock on Tuesday. A superintendent can grant another 12 hours, so that would have been 6 a.m. on Wednesday. And then thereafter, they will have gone to a magistrate to apply for a further warrant of detention. That time, that clock is very much ticking loudly, and I would expect...
How long can that be?
Up to 4 days in total. Right. Yeah, and then that's it. Mm-hmm. Completely different rules if somebody's arrested under counter-terrorism legislation, and then it's a very, very different set of time.
It's a lot longer, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah.
There was that whole controversy under Tony Blair about the length of time people could be detained, wasn't there?
Yes.
So during that time, obviously gathering evidence, interviewing...
Oh, yes, and of course, there are dozens and dozens of victims of this awful event. And we heard earlier on in the week that Merseyside Police called upon their neighbouring forces to give them some help, because, of course, every witness has got to be seen, every victim... They're a witness, their statement's got to be taken. Somebody's got to log everything that's going on. The huge forensic examination that went on of the crime scene, the vehicle, but we saw on Tuesday many forensic officers with their suits on and their masks scooping up huge amounts of potential exhibits. All of those have got to be logged, screened, for their usefulness in evidential terms. So it's a huge investigation. And, of course, a man in custody. So officers will have been designated to be the interviewing team, and sitting above the entire investigation is the senior investigating officer who has to make the strategic decisions, which they are in turn passed down. And there will have been a number of detective inspectors, for example, detective sergeants, leading team of detective constables, and that's how it goes. It cascades down. Everybody, hopefully, knowing their job, having suitable training, specialism and experience in doing it, and it's how all those wheels keep turning.
And in such a large investigation, is it hard to... Oh, we see them now. This is Jenny Sims, Assistant Chief Constable, and the Chief Crown Prosecutor for the CPS, Sarah Hammond.
I'm Sarah Hammond, Chief Crown Prosecutor for the CPS in Mersey, Cheshire. The Crown Prosecution Service has today authorised Merseyside Police to charge Paul Doyle, aged 53, from West Derby, Liverpool, with offences of dangerous driving, causing grievous bodily harm with intent, wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and attempting to cause grievous bodily harm with intent. This is following a complex and ongoing investigation into an incident in Water Street, Liverpool on Monday the 26th of May 2025. The defendant will appear before Liverpool Magistrates Court on Friday the 30th of May 2025. The investigation is at an early stage. Prosecutors and police are continuing to work at pace to review a huge volume of evidence. This includes multiple pieces of video footage and numerous witness statements. It is important to ensure that every victim gets the justice they deserve. The charges will be kept under review as the investigation progresses. We know that Monday's shocking scenes reverberated around the city of Liverpool and the entire country on what should have been a day of celebration for hundreds of thousands of Liverpool FC supporters. Our thoughts remain with all of those affected. Criminal proceedings against the defendant are active, and he has the right to a fair trial. It is extremely important that there should be no reporting, commentary, or sharing of information or media online which could in any way prejudice these proceedings. Please allow the legal process to take its course without undue speculation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Assistant Chief Constable Jenny Sims from Merseyside Police. I want to provide an update to you all during what has been a very challenging week. As always, our thoughts remain with all of those injured and affected by this appalling incident, which took place during the Liverpool Football Club parade on Monday. As you have heard from our CPS colleagues, the man arrested by Merseyside Police following the incident on Water Street has now been charged with 7 serious offences. Paul Desmond Sanders Doyle, 53 years, of Berghill Road, West Derby, has this afternoon been charged with 2 counts of unlawful and malicious wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, 2 counts of causing unlawful and malicious grievous bodily harm with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, 2 counts of attempted unlawful and malicious grievous bodily harm with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, all contrary to Section 18 of the Offences Against the Person Act 1861. He has also been charged with 1 count of dangerous driving, contrary to Section 2 of the Road Traffic Act 1988. Doyle has been remanded into custody, and he will appear at Liverpool Magistrates Court in the morning. I fully understand how this incident has left us all shocked and saddened, and I know many will continue to have concerns and questions. Our detectives are working tirelessly with diligence and professionalism to seek the answer to all of those questions. When we are able to, we will provide further information. Merseyside Police is determined to gather as much evidence as possible to ensure that every avenue is explored. Now that Paul Doyle has been charged, we ask that the judicial process be allowed to continue without any speculation online or anywhere else that could impede the pursuit of justice for all of those affected. A total of 79 people were injured. We continue to be in contact with our officers and staff, and 7 people remain in hospital, receiving the expert care of our NHS colleagues. I hope that all of those who were injured or witnessed in this terrible incident are able, given time, to heal and recover. This continues to be a large and complex investigation, and detectives are reviewing a huge volume of CCTV and mobile phone footage submitted by the public and businesses, as well as footage from our own body-worn cameras and dash cams. I'm extremely grateful for the ongoing cooperation of the public, who have and continue to share their footage and witness accounts with detectives. Their input is vital to our ongoing inquiries. I would encourage anyone who has not yet contacted the police, who may have relevant information, to please come forward and contact us. Information, including video footage, can be passed to us via the Major Incident Police portal, details of which are available on our Merseyside Police website. As always, our thoughts remain with victims and everyone impacted.
Well, that's the end of the press conference there from the Assistant Chief Constable of Merseyside Police, Jenny Sims, the last voice we heard there, and the Chief Crown Prosecutor for the Crown Prosecution Service in Mersey and Cheshire, Sarah Hammond. What they told us, if you're just joining us, is that the 53-year-old Paul Doyle has been charged with 1 count of dangerous driving, 2 counts of grievous bodily harm with intent, and 2 counts of causing grievous bodily harm with intent. We know he is from the West Derby area of the city, and what the clear instruction and the clear plea there is that the justice has to be done and seen to be done. He has to get a fair trial. We're not going to speculate on any of this. We're not going to comment on any of this. We're simply giving you the facts. Tomorrow he will face the magistrates in Liverpool. We will of course report on that and let you know what happens. We'll talk more about the issues of the day, but not this, in just a second here on Talk.
I appreciate that people who lose rapid amounts of weight without eating the correct vitamins and proteins and minerals are going to end up with osteoporosis, because obviously, you know, you need all these things. You need protein, and you need calcium, and you need vitamin D to keep your bones healthy. And what happens with these drugs is that it enhances your satiety. So basically, people just don't feel hungry.
Yeah.
So they tend to not eat the right foods.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, just to summarise one more time, and then we're going to leave it, because we want to make sure that you're informed, but also want to make sure that we don't prejudice any trial that may or may not happen. Merseyside Police have named the 53-year-old man as Paul Doyle. He's the suspect in the Liverpool crash. He's from the West Derby area of the city. The Chief Crown Prosecutor for the Crown Prosecution Service, Mersey and Cheshire, Sarah Hammond, has made that announcement, and they have charged him with 2 counts of unlawful and malicious wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, 2 counts counts of causing unlawful and malicious grievous bodily harm with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, 2 counts of attempted unlawful and malicious grievous bodily harm with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, and 1 count of dangerous driving. That is Paul Doyle is the suspect, those 7 charges, and he will answer them tomorrow in a magistrate's court in Liverpool. We will, of course, update you in regard to what happens there. That will happen tomorrow morning. In the meantime, Peter Blexley remains with me. He's our crime commentator, former Metropolitan Police detective. Great to have you in the studio, Peter. And it's interesting because the reason we originally asked you to come in is, of course, because of what Robert Jenrick has been doing. Because earlier today, the Shadow Justice Secretary decided to take matters into his own hands with fare evaders on the London Underground. This isn't just a London story, of course. It's right around the country. There are loads of people who do kind of... some people call them low-level things. I mean, they are in a sense that they're not, it's not murder or arson, but there are crimes that annoy many people. They're often undetected, unprosecuted, and of course the people such as our texter earlier on who said he spends £3,100 a year commuting, getting in and out of London for his job, and he sees people every day doing this, doing the kind of thing that Robert Jenrick actually confronted them about. Let's just watch and listen to what Robert Jenrick got up to earlier today.
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? Do you want to go back and pay like everybody else? Do you think it's all right not to pay? Why don't you go back and pay? You can say off as much as you want. But everyone else has to pay. You're carrying a knife, do you say? Nearly 1 in 25 people using London's public transport aren't paying for it. So there's 8 officers down there, but 1 minute away, that gate's wide open. It's also just annoying watching so many people break the law and get away with it. Or at least most of it. Right, should we go over here to these guys here? Excuse me, gents. Hello. You're on camera, mate. You're banged to rights. Just step to the side. All right, thanks very much, guys. It's the same with bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops. It's all chipping away at society. The state needs to reassert itself and go after lawbreakers.
Well, a little bit earlier on this afternoon, Robert Jenrick spoke to Ian Collins, my colleague here on Talk, as to why he decided to shine a light on this problem.
Sometimes you've got to get out of a suit, get out Westminster, frankly, and shame the authorities into doing things. And I was just fed up seeing people dodging their fares, not just on the London Underground, but all over the country. I represent a community up in Nottinghamshire, and I've seen it there as well. And I felt that something had to be done. And so I've done this video, there's been a massive reaction to it, and now, at least in London, I want Sadiq Khan, our do-nothing mayor, to step up, pull his finger out and get to work.
Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick, and he's had a huge reaction and many people contacting him and interacting with him. And Peter Blexley, you actually had a chat with him earlier on today.
Yes, I bumped into him in a side street at Westminster. I don't want viewers and listeners thinking that I prowl the corridors of power, because I really don't.
Many of them say you should, Peter.
Very kind, yeah. No, bumped into him, shook his hand, thanked him for what he did. It's absolutely what our politicians should be doing, and anybody who wants to criticise him for it is being very, very churlish. I understand, of course, this kind of criminality was profligated under the Conservative government as well. I completely get that, but he's in opposition and he's doing what an opposition...
he's opposing. He's pointing things out. He's saying, that's a problem, it should be solved.
He is, and I hope, following on from what he was saying, and he's absolutely right about bike theft, I hope he does bike theft tomorrow, mobile phone theft the day after, shoplifting the day after that, litter, there's another one, graffiti, and so the list goes on. We are now living in a low trust society. So many people have low trust in politicians and government, low trust in local councils, low trust in the criminal justice system, whether that be the police, the courts, the CPS, and so on and so forth. The list is endless. And when you live in low trust societies, very bad things can happen.
1 in 3 people have had their phones stolen. 1 in 3. That is the statistic. It is shocking, and actually what he's talking about there and what you're talking about, the key phrase that came out of that when he was giving his little evaluation and summing up was chipping away at society, because the values we hold, the fair play, fairness, doing things correctly, paying your fare when you go on a train or public transport, not throwing down litter, not putting your seats on a train, which is something I know you rail against on Twitter quite often. Just doing the right thing. Not that everybody does it all the time, but we try to. We're not all perfect, but we try to play by the rules. And my question that I worry about on a wider level is, where is the reward for that? Where is the reward for people who pay their taxes, who do all those things that I just mentioned there and play by the rules? And in fairness to Robert Jenrick, I think he's done something which actually, in a very straightforward way, that wasn't a complicated video. I think it's kind of brave to do it, actually. I'm not sure I would do it, to be honest. But actually, he's just illustrating a problem that we're all familiar with, but we rarely see frontline politicians actually talking about.
If everybody paid their fare, then the reward should be lower fares for all.
Correct.
And I call into question, when TfL talk about the percentage that dodge fares, how have they calculated that? How do they actually know? Because I would challenge their figures. I think the fare dodging I see is in excess of the percentage that they're trying to pin it down to.
Yeah.
How do they work that out? I think that's a very valid question.
I wonder if it's 1 in 25 who've actually been caught and fined. And if you're caught, maybe not even fined, but caught, that is something that doesn't happen very often. You've seen it, I've seen it, exactly the kind of thing that Robert Jenrick saw there. I mean, actually, do you know what? It was on Tuesday night, I was going home, my tube station, my part of London, and as I say, this is not just a London problem, it's right throughout the country. People just going through barriers, just not being challenged at all, going through, pushing their way through or jumping over them, going into the tube or the train. This happens all the time, and we're in a situation where the fares are going up, people are spending more of their hard-earned cash on commuting, if they in fact commute, and there's so little sanction for people who actually don't play by the rules.
Same like the reward for honest people who pay for all of their shopping all of the time. That should be lower prices if shoplifting was tackled properly. And of course it hasn't been, and it's got to this epidemic that we've got now. And then broaden it out into the holding the doors and the common courtesy and all of that. What is the reward you should get for that? Somebody would say thank you, wouldn't they? But of course, there's a... You
sexist, opening the door for me.
Yeah,
I mean, there are people who've basically just not acknowledged any of those things sometimes, and you just think, what's the point?
Society is in decline. I'm afraid common courtesy, manners are in decline, and of course what is in the ascent, which is a natural bedfellow of all the aforementioned crime in all its guises.
Well, you talked a little bit earlier on there about litter, and I wonder what you think of our Talk exclusive story about fly tipping becoming the new county lines. This is crooks cashing in on a waste racket. This has reached record levels. Just tell us how this actually works, how the criminals make money with this, Peter.
This cuts across everything that we've been talking about again. It's part of that greater malaise and disrespect for your fellow citizen. So, taking rubbish to a tip in a van can be expensive because you will have to pay for it. If you go to my local recycling centre, for example, you can only go there in a car, and your registration number and your details are logged, and our council haven't got to this yet, but there is some suggestion that they may put a restriction on how many times you can go to the recycling tip. No vans, the signs are all there, no vans. They have to go to another recycling centre a couple of miles away in the borough, and there the vans are weighed and there is a charge levied according to the weight and the type of rubbish that they've got. The waste disposal industry is worth £7 billion a year to the UK economy. It's a big thing. If you have your drive dug up and replaced, all that hardcore that comes out of the ground has got to be disposed of somewhere. People that want to extend their houses, for example, dig footings and all that kind of stuff. People who replant their garden in the spring and the autumn generate a lot of waste from their gardens. And who doesn't like a garden? But of course,
my dad is a big gardener, and I remember when I was younger, he was never out of the dump in our local dump. He would get trailer fulls of things, go in, dump them, and now, of course, increasingly people are charged more and more for that.
So contractors, unscrupulous contractors, who I would suggest you might also get a substandard job from. They drive up and down, knock on people's doors and say, we'll do your driveway, we'll tarmac your driveway, and often they prey on the vulnerable. So what they do is they dig up the previous existing driveway, throw that in the back of the van, and then relay it perhaps with tarmac. Well, all that hardcore, all that waste that has come out and been dug up has to go somewhere. It's very easy for an unscrupulous person to just find a quiet place where they think they're not going to be seen and tip it all out the back of the van, the truck, the flatbed, all that kind of stuff. And this is what people are doing. The cost of that to the economy is $1 billion a year. So it's about 15% of the whole size of the waste industry in the UK. And who has to pay for it? Local authorities, who have to clean up the mess and, of course, charge us through increasing council taxes because they've got to recover the money somehow. So eventually the cost falls upon us, the council taxpayers.
Some of the statistics are really shocking here. The Environment Agency estimates waste crime, as you say, costs the UK economy £1 billion a year. Illegal operators handling around 34 million tonnes of waste, enough to fill Wembley Stadium 30 times over. The fresh figures revealed by Talk say that West Midlands was the worst hit region, with 2,008 reports of waste crime, followed by Yorkshire with 1,791, East Anglia 1,678. These are just the ones that people are actually reporting. The Police and Crime Commissioner of Kent, Matthew Scott, says waste crime is the new organised crime group's activity. It's the new county lines. That is how serious this is and how organised this is. Tragically, the outcomes for fly tipping and waste crime are very low. And the Enforcement Investigations Manager at the Environment Agency, Emma Viner, she has warned waste crime is toxic. Criminals steal business from legitimate operators, trash local communities, harm the environment and avoid paying taxes which fund public services. Yet again, the people who do the right thing are penalised by those who do not.
Absolutely. And sometimes it can be literally toxic, because if you get an unscrupulous contractor who preys on a vulnerable person, say for example by taking out their asbestos, you imagine asbestos being dumped by the roadside where children may play and the such like. It's irresponsible, but unfortunately it's unsightly. We do not have sufficient deterrence for these people, and this is in the week when we know that more people are going to be released early from jail, more career criminals are going to be amongst us, and what are they going to do? They're going to come out of jail not rehabilitated, not reformed, so consequently they will commit more crime and the police will have an even greater workload. We are in a low trust, high crime society, and it's not getting any better. Something very seriously has to be done for the benefit of all.
Is it weird for you to agree with Sir Mark Rowley, to be on the same page as he was with his comments and his letter that a couple of days ago, saying largely what you're saying, Peter, in that when these people get out of prison, not rehabilitated properly, and the impact on police services just hasn't been calculated and hasn't been properly thought through by the government?
I always give credit in policing where it's due, and there is a lot of brilliant policing that is done by very courageous people on a daily basis. It's the likes of Sir Mark Rowley and other senior leaders that often feel my ire and I am very cross about. Mark Rowley this week is asking for more money. Of course he is. All the big hitters this week, from the National Crime Agency, MI5, the National Police Chiefs Council, they're all saying we need more money. They might have an argument, but by the same token, I would say to Mark Rowley, who says he's driving reform, who says he's willing to make change, but does need more money, I would say, Sir Mark Rowley, how much is the Metropolitan Police spending on DEI? I'd like an answer to that question, because I think there could be a saving there, for example. So often there is pandering to vocal minorities. There is stuff which really isn't police work that they get embroiled in, and they've made a rod for their own back. Give the public the policing they want. Moreover, give the public the policing they deserve.
Peter, wise words as always. Peter Blexley there, former Metropolitan Police detective, our crime commentator here on Talk, and of course an author and speaker as well. James has been in touch and says, why should I pay my taxes so other people can claim benefits for their kids? I've never claimed a penny, and there are plenty of things I would love to do with my daughter if my tax bill wasn't so big and I could afford to. If people can't afford to have kids, then don't. Grant says it was really nice of Liz Truss to text in to Talk and say that it was the Bank of England and members of her party that were wrong and not her in regard to the budget. Thank you, Grant. I'm not sure that I received a text from Liz Truss, but a few of her supporters anyway. Chris in Ipswich says, in fly tipping, it's important to remember anyone who is using these fly tippers can also be fined for duty of care offences. If their waste is found fly tipped and traced back to them, it is our responsibility to make sure that anyone taking our waste is licensed to do so. Gary said, here's a question for you, Peter. Which party is going to have to work hardest to win the trust of voters at the next general election? Reform, that has no experience of being in government, so no track record for us to judge them on, or Labour and the Conservatives, who have both had plenty of experience in government and have terrible track records on which they can be judged? Personally, I don't see how either of those two parties has the barefaced cheek to criticise Farage's economic policies when between them over the last 28 years while in government they have added 2.2 trillion to the national debt, almost tripling it as a share of what the country makes of GDP. Gary will put some of these thoughts and questions to Zia Youssef, the chairman of Reform UK, who will join us in a few minutes' time. Susan in Sutton says it's not just the trains where fares are being evaded. Drivers are allowing people on buses without any challenge. This happens on a regular basis. It's no wonder TfL are losing money. Cliff in Berkshire says, something to ponder. A human is about 70% water, therefore a 70 kilogram person, if only I was that person, therefore a 70 kilogram person contains 49 litres of water. As the population increases, is there any wonder we're getting short of water? And it's really interesting, final one from Steve just before the break. Steve in Milton Keynes says, I find it incredible listening to Tory MPs not seeing the blindingly obvious. Kemi was a mistake. Jenrick would take the wind out of reform sails. The middle ground many Tories say they should aim for is too far left in the eyes of the public. It's Liberals' territory. They need to start thinking Thatcher and true conservatism. Well, Kemi Badenoch, of course, says Thatcher is her true hero, but Jenrick is certainly making more of an impact today. Anyway, lots to discuss with Zia Youssef, the chairman of Reform UK, coming up very shortly. We'll also get a sports update. Stay with us here on Talk.
Joe Biden, as you know, recently announced that he has cancer.
Yeah.
And he mysteriously discovered he had cancer the weekend that this horrible book came out about how he was having and everyone goes, that's BS.
Weekend at Bernie's, probably.
Yeah. He had the prostate cancer he has is slow onset. He clearly had it for months, probably years, whatever. And people started asking, well, why didn't someone give him a prostate exam? Because I don't know about you, man. If I go anywhere near a doctor, he's got the jelly out. He's ready to go. You know?
Yeah.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Sean, who's been in touch to say, I have a great policy for reform. Councils make all the diversity and net zero jobs redundant and employ the same number of people to collect mattresses, fridges, etc. from local households and dispose of them responsibly. No extra cost, but savings on retrospective cleaning up of fly tipping. That's Sean in Bridlington. Thank you to Paul, who says, regarding the child benefit cap, we must keep it. If you want to have children, you should be able to afford it. If you give a benefit to parents with children, then the same benefit should be given to those without children, equal to 2 children. Why should a tax-paying and childless working couple not be benefiting from the state when others who have children are? Terry in Slough says the Tories and Labour still don't get it. Every time they try to knock Nigel Farage, the more popular he becomes. That's Terry in Slough who has that thought. And we will speak to Zia Youssef, the chairman of Reform UK, in just a few minutes' time. Leslie says, I think it's fantastic what Robert Jenrick did with these train fare scammers. This is all it takes to put a stop to the appalling antisocial behaviour in this country. About time somebody had the guts. Please can we ask Mr Jenrick to do the same thing with cyclists riding on pavements. Do not get me started on cyclists riding on pavements, Leslie. We are completely on the same page there. The temptation to push them over is a strong one that I have never yielded to yet. Now it is time for the
Sport Summary on Talk.
Well, TalkSport presenter Sam Ellard is with us. Sam, how are you doing?
Peter, happy Thursday to you and your wonderful listeners. I'm good. How are you?
Happy Thursday. You're still in heaven there. How's the angel Gabriel?
Honestly, when I'm here in my flat, I'm comfy, I'm cosy, where anybody that steps foot in this flat is in heaven. We're living the best life, Peter.
How could you not be? A decent night for Chelsea last night, more than decent. They won the Europa Conference League. Was it deserved, do you think?
Yeah, I think so overall. It was a good game of football, actually. Real Betis took the lead. They were leading 1-0 after 75 minutes. And then Chelsea just showed their class in the second half. In particular, Cole Palmer didn't score, but he picked up a couple of assists. Looked really, really good. You need the big plays and the big occasions to step up, and Cole Palmer certainly did that. 2 great assists for the first 2 goals. And you know what? Some people mock the Conference League because it's the 3rd European competition. And yeah, sure, Chelsea have bigger aspirations moving forward in the Champions League next season. But you know what? The fans have made that trip to Poland last night. They enjoyed themselves. The players enjoyed themselves too. Another trophy for Chelsea, beating Real Betis in the end 4-1. And fair play, and Zumureska secured Champions League football, won the Conference League. Decent first season for him in charge at Chelsea, I think.
Do you know what? I bumped into one of your colleagues last night, a guy called Stuart Armour. I know you know Stuart. It was quite late last night. He was starting his shift. He works in Paul Ross's overnight programme, and he was just so happy. I don't think I've ever seen him quite as happy after that Chelsea victory.
He's a good man, Stu.
He certainly is. It's the final of the Premier League darts tonight. Who's in action?
Ooh, looking forward to this one. Yeah, so the Premier League gets 8 players. They play 16 weeks of sort of league phase darts. Top 4 goes into the semi-finals. First place 4th, second place 3rd. Obviously, all eyes are going to be on Luke Littler, boy wonder, world champion. He's taking on Gerwyn Price tonight. Gerwyn Price, he's the only player who's actually got a really good record against Luke Littler. He's beaten him 6 out of the last 8 times, which is quite good going given how good Littler is. So that's going to be a really good semi-final. Humphreys versus Aspinall is the other semi-final. People would expect it to be a Littler-Humphreys final. They're the 2 best players in the world, number 1 and number 2. So my guess would be, I think Littler-Humphreys gets through to the final. It's hard to look past Luke Littler at the moment. There we go, boy wonder on the screen. It feels a long time ago now. He was a 16-year-old kid, sort of, you know, destined to be the next big thing. He's already that big thing at 18 months into his career. He's the best player in the world. There's live commentary on TalkSport. I think you got to go Luke Littler to win another major.
I've told you my darts joke, haven't I?
No, go on, mate. I'm looking forward to this.
I used to not like darts very much, and then Luke Littler changed my mind. You could say I've done something of a 180.
That's such a dad joke, isn't it? I love it so much.
I mean, I feel I should be a dad after that. In cricket, it's Harry Brooks' first match as England's ODI captain. How are they getting on?
It's ongoing right now, and England are going along pretty nicely, actually. Yeah, sort of a little bit of a new era, if you like, with the new captain looking to change the bad fortunes of the England white ball team. Batting first from 50 overs, posted a really big total of 400 for 8. There was 4 England batsmen that all passed 50. Duckett made 60, Root 57, Brook 58. But perhaps the best innings of them all was young Jacob Bethell, batting at 6, 82 or 53. So really good to see lots of England's kind of big name batsmen scoring runs. Jamie Smith, a new position, opening. He made 37 from 24, got the innings off to a flyer. Will Jacks batting lower down the order in a new finishing role at 7, made 39 from 24. West Indies now in reply 24 for 2. So don't think they're going to come anywhere close to that total. But yeah, early stages. Good to see some of England's batsmen finding some form this afternoon.
And tell us about the French Open. The tennis continues. What's happened today?
Yeah, so run you through some of the headlines. Novak Djokovic is playing today, leading very early on in his game. 5 British players in second round singles action. Cameron Norrie victorious, beating Federico Gomez in straight sets. Unfortunately, Katie Bolter losing in straight sets to the Australian Open champion Madison Keys. Jacob Fernley in action later on, actually in shortly. Jack Draper headlines the night session against the home favourite Gael Monfils, who's been around what feels like for my whole lifetime. Real character. That should be a really, really entertaining game. And Sonny Cartel unfortunately beaten. So what's that? 1 Brit through, 2 Brits out, 2 Brits still to come. Fingers crossed that Draper and Fernley can get over the line later on this evening.
Sam, thank you. Plenty to digest there. Sam Ellard, TalkSport presenter, thank you for joining us on the show today. Bring us right up to date on everything there. The football, the darts, the cricket and the tennis. Stephen Cambridge has been in touch and says, Peter, I am a pensioner. I live in a council flat. At the end of June, I've been told the council are putting in a new kitchen. Great. So I thought, new kitchen deserves a new fridge freezer and a washing machine. So I rang the council to ask if they can collect my old fridge freezer and my washing machine. They said, yep, absolutely fine, no problem, Steve. That'll be £250 to remove them. Great show, says Steve in Cambridge. Steve, I'm sure you, like I, do not in any way condone people who are going to, these dodgy fly tippers. But if someone came along to you, Steve, and said, do you know what, I'll take your fridge freezer and your washing machine away for 50 quid rather than 250 quid, you would at least have a think about it. And that's the problem, because the council, if they're going to charge you £250 to remove the fridge, freezer and washing machine, I'm always thinking of going up to Cambridge myself and removing them for you, Steve, and getting rid of them. I do it for much less than that. We'd have to do it legally, of course, but it really tells you an awful lot. I know somebody had an oil tank that they wanted to be removed, and the oil tank man said that'll be 60 quid removal fee, and I piped up and said, why don't you just take it on the back of your trailer, Dad, to the scrap metal place down the road, and we got £8.50 for it because they did it on the weighbridge, and I got the £8.50 and was very glad for my ingenuity, saving my father £60 in the process. Right then, we're going to talk to the Reform UK chairman, Zia Youssef. He is going to come up to chat to us in a couple of minutes. What should I ask him? What outstanding questions do you have to Reform UK? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss in the next hour. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk. Thank you so much for your company. Lots happening this evening. We've heard about the charges that have been brought against the Liverpool suspect. That's now in the public domain. He'll be at a magistrate's court tomorrow morning. We're talking about fly tipping becoming the new county lines, crooks cashing in on a waste racket, and politically the big story is Keir Starmer in St Helens today saying that Nigel Farage's economics plan is Liz Truss all over again. Well, we'll hear from Zia Youssef in just a second. He's the chairman of Reform UK. Lots to discuss with him. We'll also talk this hour about the junior doctors saying they want another 29% on top of the 22% they got previously, and Trump's tariffs. They must be overturned according to the Supreme Court in America. We'll talk about that. We'll take your views on all sorts of issues as well. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell and send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7 when Kevin O'Sullivan takes over. Be sure to get in touch. Let me know your thoughts. We'll get your voice on the air. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, a big day politically, in fact, quite a big week politically, because yesterday Nigel Farage gave a big speech. In fact, today's Thursday, isn't it? It was Tuesday. He gave the speech, apologies. He gave the speech on Tuesday, and we've seen reaction from lots of different political parties. But today, it was the turn of the Prime Minister. He was in St Helens in the northwest of England, and this is what he said about Nigel Farage.
That's the question you have to ask about Nigel Farage. Can you trust him? Can you trust him with your future? Can you trust him with your jobs? Can you trust him with your mortgages, your pensions, your bills? And he gave the answer on Tuesday, a resounding no. He set out economic plans that contained billions upon billions of completely unfunded spending. Precisely the sort of irresponsible splurge that sent your mortgage costs, your bills, and the cost of living through the roof. It's Liz Truss all over again. Now, in opposition, we said that she would crash the economy and leave you to pick up the bill. And we were right. And we were elected to fix that mess. Now, in government, we're once again fighting the same fantasy.
Well, Zia Youssef is the chairman of Reform UK. Good evening, Zia.
Good evening.
I wonder if you could tell me whether the Prime Minister has a point. He talks about billions of unfunded spending. Now, Nigel Farage, of course, gave quite a detailed answer to an ITV reporter, Carl Dinnan, where he outlined where a lot of the money would come from for what his plans are. One of the things he said was that DEI would be scrapped under Prime Minister Farage, and I think a lot of our viewers and listeners would probably agree with that. He said the cost of net zero, for example, was £40 billion a year, but that's to the economy, isn't it? It's not in regard to public spending. So do the sums actually add up?
Keir Starmer talking about fantasy economics. It was last June, if you recall. The Labour manifesto claimed that they would increase spending by £10 billion. 3 months later, their first budget, just 3 months later, they announced spending increases of £60 billion. And since then, they found a further £30 billion on their magic money tree for Chagos. So people listening to this programme understand that just like the Tories, there always seems to be infinite money for foreign citizens, whether it's illegal migrants coming here, and getting free accommodation in hotels and HMOs, whether it's the crazy net zero religion, where it's the £15 billion a year on foreign aid, infinite money for those things. You know, the climate aid, tens of billions are sending abroad. But when it comes to British citizens, when it comes to, for example, British pensioners, there's no money left. And this is the key point. What Nigel is going to do as Prime Minister is he is going to eliminate spending on things that do not add value to the lives of the British people, and will ensure that that money goes back into the pockets of hardworking British people. That 60 billion I just referred to, you know, that difference between what they claimed they were going to do in June and what they actually did 3 months later is actually enough to eliminate income tax below £20,000, and that's according to the IFS. So it's actually reform. We're the only party who are actually out there being very clear about where we're going to cut and where we're going to cut taxes and where we are going to cut spending. And this is the craziest thing about all of this: the spending cuts that we are talking about doing are actually going to improve the lives of British people. We talk about net zero. To your point, the true cost of net zero to this country, this insane net zero religion, is many multiples of that £40 billion, because it results in us having the most expensive energy costs in the world. That hits consumers, like the people listening to this program, in their pocket, and it hits businesses. It massively reduces GDP.
I agree with you on that, but on the specific point of the 40 billion that Nigel Farage said would be saved if we scrapped net zero, specifically in regard to public spending, it's less than that, isn't it?
No, so that figure comes from a report from the Climate Commission, which is now actually 5 years old. In fact, the actual number could actually be higher than that, because Labour have made announcements, for example, about the climate aid that they're sending. You know, they made an announcement they were going to send £13 billion, again in quote unquote climate aid. It's not clear exactly which budget that's going to come from. But look, whether it's 35 billion or whether it's 70 billion, these are enormous amounts of money that are actually impeding the British economy, costing British bill payers huge amounts, because that doesn't even include the £300 per household per year that British bill payers, energy bill payers, have had to pay in the form of subsidies over the last decade. And it holds back economic growth, because what is GDP ultimately? It is output, which is energy. We have the most expensive energy costs in the world. There's not a single example of a high growth economy in the world that is prospering with high energy costs.
You have said over and over again within those couple of answers that you want to save people money. You want to save the taxpayer money, you want to cut things and save the taxpayer money. That's absolutely fine. I'm not questioning that. What I am questioning is, how are you going to save money if you extend child benefit, because the child benefit cap? Because surely keeping it at 2 children is a reasonable thing to say to people. If you need to be in child benefit and you can't afford more than 2 children, don't have any more, or if you do, the state won't help you.
Yeah, well, look, all of the measures we're talking about need to be seen in the context of a £1.2 trillion a year annual budget. And look, Nigel's very clear about this. We're about family, community, country. We are on the side of working people. But look, if you look at the birth rate, Nigel's really the only political leader in the country, for as long as I can remember, probably in my lifetime, to talk about the birth rate. We are planning, and we fully intend, when Nigel's the Prime Minister, to cut net migration down to zero, right? So net migration goes to zero from the insane numbers, from the million or so that we had a couple of years ago. If we do that and the current birth rate stays the same, the population in the UK will fall from 68 million to 28 million within about 70 to 80 years' time. And what that will mean from a demographic perspective is that there's virtually nobody left to pay any taxes.
But why don't
support
you, within
the aging population.
Okay.
So look, what we're talking about in terms of lifting that cap needs to be seen in the context of a raft of other measures to help working people who are struggling to raise children. And that's things like the increased allowance for married couples.
You've mentioned working people.
To help people have kids.
Okay, so yeah, you've mentioned working people a number of times. We're in a situation with the cap as it is at the moment, where you could earn up a household, a man and a woman, or 2 parents anyway, together could earn up to £80,000 and still receive benefits from the state. There are a lot of working people who you mention who are paying for those benefits for other people, paying for things like child benefit, who are making responsible decisions themselves, who may argue that people are not making a responsible decision to have a 3rd or 4th or more children when they can't afford that. Yet the state would back them up under your plans with child benefit.
Yeah, you've got to look at the whole package of what we're going to do when we're in government. And when Nigel is very clear, for example, the benefits should not be available to people who just come here and plan to live on benefits. We're going to cut net migration to zero. We'll stop the boats and we'll deport everybody.
What about people who are here already?
Okay.
What about people who are here already who plan to live on benefits, who say, well, do you know what? I'm not going to take personal responsibility. I'm just going to let the state pay for me. They're born here and they say the state will look after me, because there's a lot of working people who you mention who will be paying for that child benefit, won't they?
Yeah, well, the majority of the recipients of the cap that we're talking of the benefits that are currently capped at 2 children are actually in work. And look, so let me give you a real example, right? Let's say you were made redundant, you were laid off because of the closure of Port Talbot, which is an appalling thing in and of itself. You happen to have 4 children and you need to retrain. You need to retrain into something else. And as a result of the policy that currently exists, you will absolutely struggle to feed your kids. So this is part of a much broader package that Reform will implement to ensure that work pays and benefits don't pay. But I want to go back to the original point, which is British people having children is an absolute good. We make no apology for saying that. And if we want to freeze, look, we're the only ones making this point, because we're the only ones serious about stopping the mass immigration. Labour and the Tories have spent decades basically engaging in human quantitative easing. And that's their answer to the birth rate issue. Keir Starmer says it's not a problem at all. Within a few hundred years, there'll be no people left in the country at all if we carry on the way that we're going. So we have to make it easier for people to have kids. And that includes, by the way, big tax breaks for working people so that they can afford childcare, so that if the mother or the father wants to stay at home and parent the children, that they're able to do that. It is so hard for people to have children in this country now. It's not a surprise that our birth rate is plummeting.
Okay. What would you say to those who say that the economic plan that Reform UK put forward this week is a bit of a mishmash? There's some that's left-wing economics, there's some that's right-wing economics. You want to nationalise things, but you also want tax cuts. Is it coherent, or is it just giving people what they want? And sometimes there's nothing wrong with giving people what they want in politics, but is it coherent? Does it have an ideological focus through it, or is it just a bit of this and a bit of that?
It's coherent and ideologically focused if your ideology is to do relentlessly what is in the interests of the citizens of the United Kingdom. You know, all of the analysts and the commentariat can use whatever phrase they want. I mean, listen, the fact that you have so-called sort of centre-right commentators, or, you know, the Tories talking about, quote, fiscal conservatism and small state and personal responsibility. In their 14 years in government, the Tories took the national debt from £1 trillion to £2.7 trillion, took public spending, state spending as a percentage of GDP, close to levels not seen since the Soviet Union, and then they have the cheek to use those phrases. So the reality is, what we're doing is being absolutely clear that Nigel, as Prime Minister, will do whatever is in the interests of the British people. Yes, we will. Look, we have to nationalise British steel, and the only reason Labour are looking to do that is because of the pressure that Nigel and Richard Tice actually put on them to do it. Had we not done that, thousands of jobs would have been lost, and we would have lost. The United Kingdom would have been unable to produce primary steel long into the future. There's nothing about that that's remotely acceptable. So we're going to cut taxes on working people. We're going to allow people to keep a lot more of their money. We're going to stop wasting a single penny of British taxpayers' money on the things that don't improve their lives directly. And if people want to say that's not ideologically coherent, good luck to them.
There's quite a few people getting in touch with the Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick when he decided to take matters in his own hands with fare evaders on the London Underground. This is what he did.
Excuse me, do you think it's all right not to pay? Seriously, why do you go back through the barrier and pay? Do you want to go back and pay like everybody else? Do you think it's all right not to pay? Why don't you go back and pay? You can say off as much as you want. But everyone else has to pay. You're carrying a knife, do you say? Nearly 1 in 25 people using London's public transport aren't paying for it. So there's 8 officers down there, but 1 minute away, that gate's wide open. It's also just annoying watching so many people break the law and get away with it. Or at least most of it. Right, should we go over here to these guys here? Excuse me, gents.
Hello, hello.
You're on camera, mate. You're banged to rights.
Just step to the side.
All right, thanks very much, guys. It's the same with bike theft, phone theft, tool theft, shoplifting, drugs in town centres, weird Turkish barber shops. It's all chipping away at society. The state needs to reassert itself and go after lawbreakers.
Zia, what do you think of what Robert Jenrick did, and who do you fear more as an opposition politician? Is it Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick? Who's better?
Well, it's a good video, and it's highlighting something that British people, and in particular people, people in and around London know from their lived experience, that they are, frankly, quite fearful now to wander around on the streets. Many people are fearful of, we hear all the time that they're terrified of letting their daughters walk home after dark, for example. There's an extraordinary statistic that when it comes to phone thefts, less than 1% of phone thefts see the suspect even identified, let alone arrested, charged, convicted, just identified. So the social contract in this country is absolutely fraying. It is hanging by a thread. What I will say, though, with regards to any Tory making any of these points, is that they had 14 years, and not only did they not improve the country, they accelerated it toward a cliff edge. So we don't live in fear of anybody, Nigel and our MPs. They're not afraid of anything. And so we're just going to keep making our case to the British people, as we have been doing. We're obviously building a campaign machine that can more than compete, in most cases now outcompete the two old parties. And that's a pretty formidable thing, I think, that we are already doing. But we're also not taking anything for granted. Look, we are still years away from the general election. We're going to continue to listen to voters, listen to British people, and campaign across the country and give people hope and optimism that this country can lead again.
Just finally, Zia, I just want to put 3 quick points to you from our viewers and listeners. One is Jane, who says, I would like to ask Zia if he feels we could get an early election. Nick says, please ask Zia, can Britain be saved? Will the country ever recover from the mess it's in today? And Brian says, please ask Zia how they will tackle the 12-year fishing treaty with the EU, knowing sanctions will be enforced if the UK stops the EU's fishing licences. Just relatively briefly, Zia, what would you say to those 3 points from our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, well, look, to go through perhaps in reverse order, the way that British fishermen have been betrayed, our fishing industry has been utterly betrayed by successive governments and successive politicians. We have to totally reset our relationship again with the European Union, because Keir Starmer has basically rejoined the EU via the back door. And the way you do that is through leveraging all of the things that are at our disposal so that we get the right results for our fishing industry that, as I say, has been hollowed out to such an extraordinary degree. Nigel has championed this for a long time. We have brilliant people campaigning for us, like June Mummery, who is a brilliant advocate for the fishing industry. She's doing great work on that. So it is absolutely high up on our agenda. And Nigel, it will be one of his first priorities as Prime Minister to unwind the betrayal that we're talking about. Can the United Kingdom be saved? Well, look, I personally do this pretty much 7 days a week, 12, 15 hours a day as a volunteer. I give it all of my time. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't think the country could be saved. Neither would Nigel, neither would our MPs. We're very clear-eyed, just as the Reform supporters who are listening to this programme, about the challenges that the country faces, but we're also hugely optimistic about what the United Kingdom can achieve if we actually had competent leaders who put the interests of their own people first. Remind me what the third one was?
Early election?
Well, I really wish there was an opportunity, but how many prime ministers did the Tories get through without calling a general? Was it 6? A crazy number.
No one ever gives up power willingly, do they?
Exactly. So look, I hope it could be true. We are preparing. We will not be ill prepared should one come early, but I think if Keir Starmer was to go prior to when the next general election needed to be held, I think, frankly, I think it might even be something even worse, like Angela Rayner. But the reality is, we are now in a position where Nigel's the bookmaker's favourite to be the next Prime Minister. We are, Reform leads even in the gold standard YouGov poll. There's not necessarily always that kind of reform. We're leading Labour by a staggering 8 points. We've got a lot of work to do, but I am very confident that this country has a bright future ahead of it.
Zia Youssef, Chairman of Reform UK, thank you for joining us on Talk this evening. What do you think of what Zia Youssef said there? Are you convinced by Reform UK's economic arguments, or are there other arguments? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Maybe you think Starmer is talking sense and that Farage would be Liz Truss 2.0. Maybe you think that comparison is wrong anyway, and maybe you think Liz Truss did a good job. Whatever your opinion, if you think I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. That's okay. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I thank you to this person who's texted in to say, I do not not know why Starmer thinks he is fighting reform if Labour are doing such a great job. Loads more to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk.
Can you imagine Sadiq Khan doing that? He was too busy saying that we should legalise cannabis this week to bother about shoplifting, mobile phone theft, fare dodging, the kind of things that Londoners actually want to see him doing. What we've got to see here is real action, because I think ordinary Londoners, as people across the country, they feel almost silly, they feel foolish that they are paying when they're going to work, going to school, going to college, going shopping, and they're seeing all these people who are breaking the rules.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the row over whether junior doctors should get another pay rise, they got 22%, they're asking for another 29%. It's a huge issue. It's something we'd like to talk to the British Medical Association about. We've asked them here on Talk Drive every single day this week, today is now Thursday, for 4 days since this controversy reared its head on Sunday. We have asked them every day, British Medical Association, please come on, please talk to us, please outline why you think that junior doctors should get this rise, why you're campaigning for this, why you're lobbying government for this. Pretty straightforward questions. I'd like to do a reasonable interview with them. You know me, people even I strongly disagree with. I generally have, not all the time, but I generally have a fairly straightforward conversation with them. I don't think junior doctors should get 29%. In fact, I don't think they should get anything more than the huge rise that they got already, the 22%. But the British Medical Association won't come on. They won't tell us what they think. We know largely what they think, but I'd love to speak to someone from the British Medical Association, but they have said no 4 times. Maybe tomorrow will be our lucky day. We'll find out, because we're going to ask them again tomorrow whether they'll come on. In fact, we're going to keep asking them until they come on and justify to us and say why they think the junior doctors who, as I say, got a 22% pay rise. I don't know if you got a 22% pay rise, I certainly didn't this year. Why they believe junior doctors should get 29%. In the meantime, we have someone who can explain this row to us very, very well, and that's Roy Lilly, the former NHS Trust chairman. Wes Streeting, Roy, the Health Secretary, says that striking junior doctors have lost the public support, and certainly when you look at some of the polling around this, last time it was about 53% of the public, just over half, that supported them when it came to the junior doctor strike. Now it's way down, about 20% percentage points lower than that, and the fact is that people just want junior doctors to get on, do the job, look after people and stop whinging about their pay.
You're right, and I think I just wonder the extent that the public support will have any influence on what really now, Peter, is a very radical trade union. I mean, the BMA used to be honest, a dining club years ago, and they never considered going on strike. And then a group of doctors under the name of Doctors' Votes, young doctors, quite legitimately using the constitutional procedures in the BMA, took over most of the committees and started running it in a much more militant way. It was a bit like Momentum did with the Labour Party, and they've just taken it over. And if we sort of go back a bit and unpick all this, they started off 2 years ago, wanted a 35% pay rise. The justification for that was they said that for years they hadn't had a decent pay rise and inflation had overtaken the value of their wage packets, which was, you know, you can make that calculation work. My view at the time was that this was the BMA's own fault because they'd been asleep at the wheel, and that the junior doctors couldn't expect the taxpayer to stump up for what was really poor industrial relations between the Department of Health and the BMA. Anyway, so they went on strike. There were 44 days of strike. Then, of course, we had a change of government. Wes Streeting came in and he took advantage of a very complicated set of numbers. Fundamentally, the Tories had given the junior doctors a 9% pay rise, which they just dumped on them, and they said, that's all you're going to get, you know, suck it up. Streeting then came in 2 years ago, and he was able to cobble together a deal based on the 9%, an extra 4%, and then a 6% deal, which was in the second year. And they aggregated that all together to make it look like a sort of a 20%-ish deal. It wasn't really, if you actually calculate the percentages, but top line, it looked right. And I remember you and I had a conversation about this, and I said, this is not going to get them anywhere near the 35% they want. It's a 2-year deal. They needed to have done a 3-year deal. Otherwise, the junior doctors are going to come back for afters. And guess what? They come back for afters. They want to have another go. And of course, this time round, they're saying, well, we want the gap in the original bit, the year we've missed. And by the way, during that year that we've missed, inflation's gone up again, so we want another 20-odd%. So that's how they've arrived at this. Then, of course, we get into all the, you know, the issue around the economy, what's going to happen in the...
And there's so many people who work in the private sector who haven't seen nearly the rises that those in the public sector have. It's not just junior doctors, it's many other public sector employees. And yes, okay, fair enough, the commissions around this said there should be rises. The government has said that they'll implement that. They don't have to, but they're saying they will. I just wonder what you think will happen, Roy.
Well, the doctors are balloting now for a strike. My guess is it will be very close, and my guess is they won't get a ballot for a strike. Now, I'm probably going to have to come back on here, Peter, and eat humble pie, but I can't see it myself, because the junior doctors, or they're called resident doctors now, they lost a lot of money during the strike because the BMA don't pay strike pay. So they lost a lot of money. And of course, this junior doctor title, which they've changed now to resident doctors, includes a lot of doctors who are really quite senior, and they will have families and mortgages and responsibilities and all the rest of it. And I just wonder how many of them are going to take a chance on another protracted strike, which could run us into the winter. So my first prediction is I think they will narrowly lose the strike vote. Secondly, of course, now we've got Wes Streeting doing an imitation of Steve Barclay, because it was Steve Barclay who was the Conservative Secretary of State for Health when all this kicked off last time. And Barclay said, I'm not going to give in, and I'm not going to give the doctors any more money. And Streeting really has just borrowed the Conservatives' playbook, and he's reeling it, and he's rerunning it, really saying, I'm not going to give them any more money. So here we go. So what do I think? I think they will have to settle for the pay review body settlement this year, and I think that Streeting will get into some talks with them over some of the peripheral things. Maybe there's some talk I'm hearing now that they might do debt forgiveness on their student loans, and some of these doctors, of course, a huge amount of money.
That's going to be fascinating if that happens. There's going to be a lot of annoying people after that. Going to be an awful
but I
lot.
just wonder how much humble pie I'm going to have to come back and eat on your programme.
Well, your predictions have been correct previously, and I predict that the predictions will predictably be correct, Roy. So no doubt we'll talk more. Thank you very much. That's Roy Lilly there, former NHS Trust Chairman.
Cheers, thanks.
Forgiving the student loans of junior doctors, really? There are loads of people still paying off student loans. Loads of people didn't get the chance to go to university. The whole point of student loans is that it's a fair thing that you pay back to go to university. That's a whole other row. Very, very interesting. One person's been in touch to say the BMA actually stands for the British Marxist Association. Now do you get it? Very interesting to hear that. It reminds me of Dennis Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher's husband, who called the BBC back in the day. Of course, it was only BBC One and BBC Two. He called them M1 and M2, Marxism 1 and Marxism 2. You'd think, says this texter, there was an election coming up later this year the way Starmer is attacking reform. He is scared. Peter says, thanks for showing the Starmer clip. That's the best laugh I've had for ages. Zia Youssef would have Starmer for breakfast. The boy done good, says Peter. And Rob says, Zia is a businessman, as are most of Reform, and know what they're talking about and sincerely believe they truly do have this country's welfare at heart and will do their best for the British people, unlike this horrendous, useless, incompetent Labour clowns we're currently suffering under. Lots to discuss, including what Sandy says on Twitter. Two-tier Keir has just got a cheek asking if we can trust reform. And Andrew says, great show again, Peter. Starmer outlined today all the reasons I can't trust him. He needs to look at the meaning of the word in the context of his attack on this country, says Andrew. Les is talking about kneecap, and he says the description of a Northern Irish IRA terrorist tactic, of course there are other terrorist organisations that use it as well, as a musical group's name warrants an immediate ban on every level, says Les. Nobody wishes to make martyrs out of the perpetrators of terror on any side, and Northern Ireland does not need this type of negativity to be seen on any stage of any country. Well, thank you for that, Les. I completely agree with your thoughts on that. A couple more here. Rotten Lass says the key to Nigel Farage's financial policy is scrapping net zero. Say it to these spineless conservative placemen like Richard Holden, Shadow Paymaster General. You've got to be kidding me. Philip says, hi Peter, reservoirs are a Victorian solution for a Victorian problem. Thames Water has a £250 million desalination plant in Beckton currently mothballed. Why can't the government buy it off Thames Water and get it up and running, says Philip. And Natalia says, I'll come to that in a second. Jan says, why can't Farage select the policy that is best for the country regardless of whether it is left or right? Maybe it's just nerds like me that care if it's left or right. Maybe actually what Reform is a very different party that doesn't quite conform to the previous standards. Whirly Gig says, I can only presume your mortgage went up after the Truss government. I suggest you talk to an impartial economist. The bond market rates are worse now than they were then. The media do force politicians' hands and resignations unfairly at times. Wasn't the media that asked Liz Truss to resign, it was her own party. And my mortgage didn't go up as a result of the Truss government. So neither of those things is true. Amy says, you're right, Peter. Nigel Farage has got into Starmer's head. He is scared. If he isn't scared of him, then why did he make his speech all about him? And isn't it a bit rich of Starmer to say that when we can't trust Farage with the finances, just look at what Labour are doing? And finally, Natalia has been in touch from Israel and says, Peter, anyone with an ounce of understanding of the Israel-Hamas conflict will tell you it's a terrible deal which will only prolong the war. This is the deal that Netanyahu has said yes to so far. We don't know what Hamas think of this exact iteration. That said, we're beyond desperate to get our innocent people back, which Hamas is, of course, very well aware of. We're in an impossible situation, and I can't stress this enough. Heartbroken doesn't begin to describe the way most of us here feel, from the moment we wake up each morning to the time we finally manage to close our eyes for a few hours of disruptive sleep. And that's Natalia. She's been in touch before, and she's told me about those rockets that are still coming into Israel. Israelis, Palestinians, they're all having a really rubbish time at the moment. Let's hope that there can be peace there and some hope for the future. Lots to discuss in just a second, including what Donald Trump has been saying. His press secretary is giving a press conference at the moment. His Liberation Day tariffs must be overturned. That's according to the Supreme Court. We'll get the latest on that from Steve Gill in just a second here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Some breaking news here on Talk, and that is that Andrew Tate and his brother Tristan Tate will return to the UK to defend themselves against charges of rape and other offences. This is a lawyer representing the siblings has said yesterday. Around this time, those charges were made public. The Crown Prosecution Service charging Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate with over 20 charges between them of all sorts of sexual crimes. Andrew Ford of Holborn Adams, representing the Tate brothers, has confirmed in a statement that once proceedings for separate charges the brothers are facing in Romania are concluded, the Tates will return to the UK to face the allegations. Andrew Tate faces 10 charges, including rape, actual bodily harm, human trafficking and controlling prostitution for gain relating to 3 women, and his brother Tristan Tate, who's 36, faces 11 charges relating to 1 woman, including rape, actual bodily harm and human trafficking. Now then, Caroline Levitt, who is Donald Trump's press secretary, she's currently giving a press conference in the White House. She has said so far that she believes that the Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is judicial overreach. This is what she's saying right now.
It is now in their hands, and for further details on where that stands, I would defer you to the Department of Defense and the United States Air Force. I have nothing more for you on that. Deanna.
Thanks, Caroline. 2 questions, one on Big Beautiful Bill, one on immigration.
Sure.
Yesterday, Trump said, we'll be negotiating that bill, and I'm not happy about certain aspects of it, but I'm thrilled by other aspects of it. Wondering if you could, share any specifics on that. And an immigration.
So Caroline Levitt there, just taking questions from the White House press corps, but a little bit earlier on, she was giving her views on what the Supreme Court has done, because President Trump's economic agenda has been thrown into doubt after a federal court has ruled that his worldwide tariffs were unlawful and should be overturned. Apologies, not the Supreme Court actually, I got that wrong. It's actually a panel of 3 judges on the US Court of International Trade. Apologies for that error. That court, the US Court of International Trade, has found that Trump lacked the authority to begin his trade war when he declared Liberation Day last month. And at the time, the president claimed the reciprocal tariffs were necessary due to a national emergency. However, the court has ruled in favour of a group of 5 small businessmen which alleged the tariffs were an unprecedented power grab, and the court has ordered the tariffs to be vacated. Now, Caroline Levitt, his press secretary, says that's judicial overreach. Let's speak to Steve Gill, who is a former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administration. Steve, what do you make of what this court, the US Court of International Trade, has done and the reaction from the White House?
Well, first of all, this is a very minor court. It is a low-level district court. The previous most important ruling from this court was dealing with tariffs on Snuggies, the kind of blanket that you put your feet in. That's their most important ruling.
I think over here we call them slankets.
In this case.
I think over here we call them slankets. It's like a blanket, it's like a sleeping bag, but something in between.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So their big ruling so far has been Snuggies. They are way off base here, and this only deals with a small portion of the tariffs that Trump has imposed. The vast majority of them will proceed ahead. And when you look at the law, the president has the authority to do this. This is another attempt to block temporarily the Trump agenda, because as it moves through the appellate process into the Supreme Court, it almost certainly will be overturned. And there are other ways to impose these same tariffs, maybe at a higher rate in the meantime.
What do you think happens now? Will this be appealed by the Trump White House? Because if it's a minor court, surely it can go further up the judicial chain.
Yeah, I think they've already appealed this, which they've asked for a stay to have the court hold this proceeding, allow the tariffs to continue while it goes through the appellate process. Again, this activist court is likely to stick to their own ruling, and we'll see if the Court of Appeals or maybe the Supreme Court will step in. You cannot have these unelected judges dictating policy for an elected president, and I think that's the issue that we're seeing time and again. And keep in mind, most of these district court rulings, these injunctions that we're seeing across the U.S. are being overturned as we move further up the appellate process, and I think that's what's going to happen here as well.
Where do things stand now? Because I sort of forget where we are exactly in regard to the 90 days. Presumably, well, we know we're more than halfway through, but are we in the 60s or something in terms of the 90 days that I'm afraid I haven't been keeping track every single day. These negotiations are continuing. We have a deal with the United States, or the heads of agreement kind of deal in regard to trade. Are other trade deals being done? Does the Trump administration feel it's making progress in that perhaps some of the tariffs can be avoided in other countries?
They're making some progress. Canada recently has called to say, okay, hold off on ours. We're going to have a deal with you soon. You have the EU that was moving very slowly, and keep in mind the EU was threatening individual nations like Italy and others, saying, well, if you strike your own deal, we're going to kick you out. Some are saying, fine, we can do Brexit without having to have a vote. But if you have these nations that can't negotiate their own deals, having to wait for the EU to do their deal, President Trump has pointed out that the EU is not making any progress. He was going to impose a 50% tariff on EU products. They've now asked for a delay because they're saying they will come to a deal. And supposedly, with the additional delay for those tariffs being imposed, President Trump is moving forward to see if a deal can be reached with the EU. The bottom line is there are tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers that are having to be negotiated, and that makes it complicated. It's not just what tax are you putting on foreign goods, but what other ways are you keeping products out, whether it's restrictions on ownership or failing to, in the case of China, restrict the theft of intellectual property. So these are pretty complicated. I think that's why there's a delay in getting these deals done.
Steve, thanks for your analysis there. That's Steve Gill, who's a former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administration. We heard a little bit of what Caroline Levitt was saying there earlier. The problem is that her name is spelled Leavitt, and it always makes me think of Leave It, like, leave it, Darren, he ain't worth it. Grace is in London and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Grace, what do you think of what Trump is doing?
I think so many things. I'm sorry I didn't quite catch all of the interview that you had said, so I can't directly respond to that. But I followed Trump on social media for a while because I thought I won't just believe what mainstream media is saying about him. I want to see his own words.
Sure.
And so I followed his own words, and I was just really struck by the arrogance. And I was kind of brought up being told you should aim to be humble. And I didn't kind of...
Donald Trump has many things, but I'm not sure humble is one of them.
Well, exactly. So that's why it kind of riled me. And I thought it was odd because a lot of people who claim to be Christians were supportive of him. And I'm thinking, but the Bible tells us to be humble and not to be arrogant. And recently I've been reading a little bit about how he was influenced by, and he said that one of his biggest influences was a guy called Norman Vincent Peale, who had these kind of self-help books saying essentially a bit like mindfulness, but the idea that you can kind of bring about what you want if you just kind of will it to be. And he was essentially a fraudulent pastor, in my opinion. And there are plenty of fraudulent Christians across the pond.
Fraudulent preachers of many different religions. Beware false prophets.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And I mean, even back in Jesus' time, Jesus was getting angry with people who were kind of pretending to be religious so that they could get power over others, but they weren't actually trying kind of with their hearts and minds to follow God. And it seems to me like this guy, Norman Vincent Peale, has influenced Trump, when Trump was really young, into thinking that he can just kind of do what he wants. He can kind of say he's going to get something or he's going to have something.
It's a strategy. Look, I don't really know about Norman Vincent Peale, but I do know about Donald Trump. And, you know, his strong character and his belief that he is the man is something that I would argue, maybe not quite expressed in the same way, but certainly that sort of slightly messiah complex, to continue your metaphor, Grace, is almost what's needed in politics. You've got to say, like, I'm the person to be leader of the free world here, and I can sort everything out.
I don't know. I think you need to have someone who has boldness and who has confidence, but I think it's really important for anyone to look at the realities on the ground, in this case, you know, the American Constitution, and also to listen to people around who have more wisdom and experience. He might have experience in business, although I'm not quite sure how brilliantly his businesses are done.
Yeah, he's become a billionaire, you know, not too badly.
I think he needs to listen to people who have experience in politics as well, and I think ultimately that it is good for people to have compassion for other human beings, and I have been really bothered by the lack of compassion I have seen from him.
Okay. Grace, thanks for your thoughts there. Donald Trump needing to beware perhaps of false prophets, but also false profits from his business. Ian in Somerset, if doctors get their student loans cleared, I'm guessing all the nurses will want the same deal. Yeah, I think they will. I think the teachers will be next. I think there'll be a load of people who say, hold on a second here, having student loans cancelled, what's going on here? We've put loads of money into training these doctors so they can earn more money than everybody else. Then they want their student loans gone, even though what what they actually paid to have their education to become doctors, which allowed them to earn more money and have a much higher standard of living than most people, well, actually, we're going to forgive that small proportion of that total cost. I think there'll be a lot of people very angry about that, and I'm afraid I may well be one of them. Hans says, whatever you think about the politicians and modern politics, you cannot but admire and respect Robert Jenrick for what he did on the London Underground today. It took real courage to do what he did and challenge those knife-carrying fare dodgers. Well, one of them said he was carrying a knife. We don't know if he actually was. Well done, Bob. You've got my vote. So a hands up from Hans, a thumbs up from Hans there to Robert Jenrick. Jane says, Starmer seemed rattled by Farage. Ed Davey seems to talk about Trump more than anything else. Just amusing to watch them so out of touch with what's going on in their own country. Lots more to discuss, and we'll have a chat with Kevin O'Sullivan about what's coming up on his programme. Stay with us here on Talk.
I found the world's leading AI deepfake guy who was in France, and I emailed him, didn't know me, and I said, would you just look at these bits from my book and tell me what you think? Next minute, his PA emailed me and said, oh, he's coming to London, can you do a breakfast meeting at 7? He said, how do you know this stuff, Brian? I said, well, I sort of don't know it. And he said, the Chinese, this is 18 months ago, he said the Chinese and the Russians are there, and the Americans are spending over, FBI are spending over $500 million, you know, doing it, researching it. So it was like, wow.
This is real.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just looking through my Twitter here, and Sandy has said, obviously 235,000 plus Reform members trust the Yousaf and Reform's financial policies. That's why two-tier care is in panic mode, she says. Also, Diana Harding says, I love Roy Lilly. Actually, I remember Roy saying in the past that the BMA stood for the British Moaners Association. Steve says Zia Yousaf came across really well. He answered all your questions and he didn't filibuster. Paul has been in touch on fare evaders with a voice note. This is what Paul says.
Good evening, Peter. Paul from Hartlepool. You mentioned about the drivers allowing people on the buses up here and various other areas when they've not paid. The truth is, I've noticed it recently travelling from Hartlepool to Sunderland. And I spoke to a driver and he said to me, look, he said, I've got a family, a wife and children. He said, I don't want to lose my job. And if I challenge these people, they will side with the illegal immigrants. Good evening.
Paul, I just think that says so much about the fact that even that basic level of discipline isn't there, and the fact that that bus driver, who I think probably, I think there are a lot of people in public roles, in those kind of roles where, you know, it's not worth it. It often isn't worth it to do the kind of challenging that Robert Jenrick did today, because people make complaints, they allege all sorts of things. Lee has been in touch as well on with a voice note on Robert Jenrick.
Hiya Peter, it's Lee from Rugby. I'm a Reform member. This thing with Jenrick voicing up in the way that he did today, I mean, yeah, commendable what he did, facing up those people, and it was obviously quite scary. The interesting thing for me is, did Kemi say, yeah, you go ahead and do that, because that is some significant political posturing. That's him well and truly nailing his colours to the mast, in my idea. The fact that, as I say, shouldn't that be the sort of thing that Kemi should be doing? Anyway, great show, mate. And by the way, P.S., it does make me laugh hearing Starmer criticising Nigel. They really are on the ropes. Anyway, have a great show, mate. Nice one.
Thank you, Lee. Lots of really good points there. I'm not sure. Robert Jenrick asked, can we be a knock for too much permission to do anything? I think he does what he wants to do, and I think she might be perhaps not massively amused at all times when that happens. That's certainly what I'm told. Richard has been in touch on fly tipping.
Hi Peter, it's Rich from Dudley. Regarding the fly tipping problem we have, my brother-in-law is a small one-man rubbish removal, waste management, clearances, and he has actually got a council-issued waste carrier's licence. And less than 30% of people actually ask to see it, even though he's got it, and he will readily show it, but he shows it to everybody anyway, just to prove that he's legitimate, and he takes it to a local tip. But if he's only having to show 30% of the people and he's got one, so the other 70% aren't bothered, or they're just unaware. That's why it's so easy for unscrupulous people just to dump it anywhere, and the people who are paying to have it removed might not even know where it's going. Thanks, Peter. Great show.
Great voice note, Richard. Really illustrated the issue there, and I'm really glad that he is doing the right thing, that he is playing by the rules. But again, so many people asking the question, where is the reward for doing the right thing? Because I'm sure he has, you know, tough margins and has to make lots of business decisions and all sorts of different challenges that he has. And of course, there's so many unscrupulous people who are quite literally cleaning up and then dumping that stuff by the side of the road. Loads of people getting in touch with calls. I'll take as many as I can in the next 7 minutes. Lee is in Kent. Lee, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello there, Peter. How are you doing, my old friend?
Very well, Lee. Good to hear from you. What would you like to say?
Right, I've just what it is I'm a Reform member, and a couple of little points. The people that's really gone under the radar. Kent County Council have just been taken over by Reform. Now I get lots of emails because I'm a Reform member, I get lots of emails about what they're going to do and all that sort of thing, and not a lot of people know this, but Reform members of County Council Kent have taken a 5% pay cut off their own back. Now can you see Labour doing that?
Well, I'm not aware of it ever happening in another council, certainly, but good for them anyway. And you know, that's a good thing. I think a lot of people will be happy with that, and certainly what they do with the saved money, I suppose, is the next question, Lee.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, you know, I'm not being funny, but I mean, Reform for me are the only real choice now left in this country. Labour have completely shot themselves in the foot. I mean, he's jumping up. Old Keir Starmer's jumping up and down saying about the amount of money.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Lee, because Christina's been in touch with a text and she says, "Hi, Peter. Starmer's done a wonderful marketing job for Reform UK today. He's a great spokesman."
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, you know, the question and answers was just fantastic. Yeah, I'll tell you what, the media absolutely nailed him.
Lee, thanks for your thoughts. I appreciate that. Laura in Wiltshire has been in touch on the 2-child benefit cap. Laura, what are your thoughts on this?
Peter, good evening.
Good evening.
I was a lifelong Tory activist, blah, 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 now a Reform voter, and I'm utterly baffled by this child benefit cap scrapping. I'm a mother of one. I'm nearly 60. It was my choice. It was our decision for financial reasons, apart from anything else. I have 5 nieces. They're all married. Some of them have got kids. Some of them are planning on having kids. They're in their 30s. They're all graduates. And the reason they are not having more than 1 or 2 children is because they cannot afford the preschool fees.
It's really expensive. It's really expensive.
It's unbelievable. It's hundreds of pounds a day, Peter. And 2 of them are Cambridge graduates who are primary school teachers, and they're having to only teach 3 days a week in state primary schools because they cannot afford to go to work more than that. And one of them is actually only going to work for nothing, because she wants to keep her career going. So
all the money she earns is going into childcare?
Completely, but she wants to keep her career going. So what are they supposed to do? Are they meant to look at reform? I just don't get it. They're going to say, you got no job, you can have as many kids as you like, we're going to give you all this.
So do you now disagree with Reform UK and what Reform UK are saying on this?
I disagree with them on this, and if I could meet Nigel tomorrow or Zia, and if he's really worried about the number of children we're having, we should be encouraging people like my nieces to have more children, because they are workers, they are really good people. And I would really love to speak to Nigel face to face, or Zia Yusuf, and say, how on earth can you really argue that this is a good thing?
Is this a deal breaker for you, Laura? Could you go somewhere else? Could you leave the party?
No, I'm still going to have to go with Reform.
Okay.
I really have. And I was the secretary of my local Conservative Association, joined when I was at uni.
Okay.
I moved away. It's not a deal breaker, but I would really like to have a face-to-face conversation to understand on this one policy, Peter.
Okay, Laura, strong points there. Thank you very much indeed. Apologies to the callers we couldn't get in. We're just running out of time, but I definitely want to have a quick chat with Kevin O'Sullivan to see what's coming up in your programme on the other side of the news.
We're going to kick off with the migrant crisis. Dominic Cummings has made a really good point. Why exactly is Keir Starmer making precisely the same mistakes as Rishi Sunak? Whatever you think about Dominic Cummings, he's a brilliant political analyser, and he said,
agreed,
if you look at what Sunak did and what he said, Keir Starmer has not learned from those mistakes. He's come in and done exactly the same thing. So we're going to have a look at that. Also, I'm getting really sick. I mean, I'm not here to sort of bang the reform drum, but you get these Labourites and the Tories going, how is Farage going to pay for all these tax breaks? How's he going to... He keeps telling them. He keeps saying, I'm going to pay for them by cancelling the net zero claptrap and all that diversity claptrap that you pour the billions of pounds down the drain with. That's not where I'm going to pay.
And there's also the small point of, are they in any position to criticise Nigel Farage on management of the economy? Are either the Conservatives or Labour in any position to criticise them?
They will not. They cannot face or even confront the fact that he's got a point.